Trustee Rowe, Trustee Scott, and President Rowan. Thank you all for coming. Not live streaming this meeting tonight. Video recording will be available on the village's YouTube channel. And with that, this brings us to the portion of our meeting for those that allows for those in attendance to address the board regarding non-agenda items. And yours is not. Let me just read this real fast. Please. Next item on the agenda is public comment. If you'd like to speak about a matter that is listed, we ask that you wait, but said this is. So, I hope you filled out a written speaker form. If you haven't, please do so after. This time is intended for an opportunity for you to make comments to the committee. We'll listen to everything you have to say, but this will not ordinarily be the time for discussion or engagement by us. If appropriate, we may direct staff to respond to questions of issues raised at a later date. All speakers, and by that I mean probably you, will be limited to 3 minutes, but to be fair to all, we will strictly enforce the rule, and we request that you and any other speaker be respectful, civil, and non-repetitive, and we know. And we ask that all members of the audience refrain from any applauding or making any of the comments during or after any speaker. And with that,
Stay seated. Is that okay?
Whatever is more.
That's fine. Okay. I will confine my comments to the 2025 budget to make sure that I'm addressing non-agenda items. In particular, I'd like to address the community grants program that was budgeted at $116,000. And the way I understand it, the village collects tax money from residents and distributes it to nonprofit organizations of the trustees' choice, which raises an obvious question: why not let the residents keep their own money and make contributions to organizations of their choice? Alternatively, the village could use this money to fund needed projects. Residents can make contributions to organizations, nonprofit organizations, but they can't do public work projects on their own. For example, there are projects in the 2018 Active Transportation Plan that the village could have funded for medium cost, that's according to the ATP, $40,000 to $75,000, and now would cost over $500,000 to implement, according to the village engineer. Meanwhile, the village has been giving money away instead. So the message is, if you can't fund needed projects, please stop giving money away. So while pedestrians are left with 1940s technology that could have been updated at a modest cost with money that was given away, the trustees will now have state-of-the-art council chambers costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm just saying, please try to be a little more prudent with the way the money is spent, and don't give it away when there are reasonable projects that need to get done. The other comment that I just want to make on a different topic is I looked at the volumetric water rate over the past 5 years, and it has increased during that time nearly 40%, while inflation has been more like 25%. So question is, why is that so expensive compared to inflation? Obviously, the source water doesn't cost any more today than it did then. So I guess my message is try to be a little more fiscally prudent. So with that, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good meeting.
Anything else? See and hearing none. At this point, if we could get a motion to approve the minutes, unless there's any comments on it. All right, any? Okay, all right, so moved. Seconded.
Second.
By Joe. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. And that brings us to the review of our monthly financials, please.
Okay, thank you. I am going to go through the September treasury report very quickly, but please stop me if you have any questions. We'll go through the September treasurer's report, the CIP updates, and then you all have a very large book that will be taking you through page by page with every detail. Okay, so included in the packet was the September financial report. Same story that we have seen with property taxes, and I'm sorry, I don't have better news for you. We were really hoping that the county would be able to make this happen by October first, and obviously none of you received your tax bills, so we have not been able to pull this together. So now we are hoping for a November 1 issuance date with a December 1 due date. This is going to complicate a few things. Obviously, with just from a cash flow perspective, we do have enough liquidity to cover our bills, to cover payroll, to cover debt service payments, but we are going to have to make some transfers to be able to cover that. We received a whopping $2,000 in property taxes in September, which is just kind of the fallout of as people settle their property tax bills. If they have disputes, those receipts come in sporadically. And then on a sales tax basis, still running higher than last year in monthly budget, so that's a good news story. This was a strong revenue month aside from property taxes, places for eating tax, utility tax, building permits, alarm permits, parking fees, and sewer charges all came in higher than our this time last year and the monthly budget target.
Sorry, with regard to the real estate taxes, are you anticipating that some of those won't be received until January?
Yes. Not just because folks might pay late, but mostly because the county is just slow in turning that money around to us. Because
okay.
they collect it and then it comes to us sporadically. I think we talked about this at the finance committee level. There's not a whole lot of organization, rhyme or reason as to how the tax distributions come to us. We may receive 85 cents one day, we may receive 2 million the next. So I do expect that to trickle in. The biggest milestone for us to be mindful of is we need those property taxes to come in within 60 days of December 31st for us to be able to account for it in 2025. So that is really the hope, is that we get the bulk of those property taxes within that time frame. On the expenditure side, expenditures are running higher than last year, about 66% of budget. So really where we would expect them to be at this time of year. When we look at annual revenue projections, this assumes that we will receive the bulk of property taxes by December 31st. That we will have a surplus compared to budget of just under $600,000. As we get closer to the end of this month, obviously, we may have to adjust that depending on what happens with November 1st. When we add expenditures into that equation, we're looking at drawing down 3 million. If all the revenues and expenditures come in where we expect them to be, and that's compared to a planned drawdown of 4.8 million. And these numbers are updated year-end estimates have been rolled into the budget and all of the fund balances that we'll talk about shortly. Fund reserves at the month end, we're at 12.7 million. So we are starting to dip a little bit. That general fund balance, we're starting to see that come down because we're waiting on property taxes. That is the normal cycle, the normal fiscal cycle for us. Our cash balances go up when we receive taxes, we draw them down, and they usually replenish a little bit sooner than they have in this year. On the water fund side, we had another strong month of bills. You may have heard, or I'm sure our finance department's heard, both our volumetric revenue and our fixed charge revenues running higher than last year due to rate increases, but also to irrigation. We've had an extended period of dry weather, and we're starting to see that in water bills. The volumetric revenues at 79% of budget, fixed charges at 74%. And then our expenditures are running a little bit higher than last year, but only at 64.2% of budget. And really the big driver there is the CIP projects. So we'll see, as we see the final payments come through for the Dundee water main, we'll see that number tick up. Our annual revenue projections in the water fund, if everything goes as expected and we see these trends continue, we'll exceed our budgetary targets by almost $390,000. When we add expenditures to the equation, we're still drawing down the water fund by 2.3 million compared to a planned drawdown of 2.8. So that's pretty much on target. I will say that was a planned drawdown for capital. That is the water main project that's using up the last of those bond proceeds. And then the fund reserves at month end were $3.3 million. Turn it over to Stella for a golf fund update.
Thank you. Well, September was a fantastic month for us. We were 24% over our revenue budget, 18% over the grounds budget. And on a happy side note, we have exceeded our annual revenue budget for the year by 10%. This was anticipated as now things are going to slow down dramatically with the work on the parking lot. Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club held a cultivation event. Jillian Goodman, one of our very generous donors, held an event at her house with some very selected people that are mostly interested in supporting from the residential side. We went through the history of how the golf club came to be because residents helped financially in creating the golf club. So there is a push to try to get Lakeshore Country Club and Skokie Country Club members to come together to create a large donation. So we're happy with that event and hopefully it will come into some nice donations. Construction update, everything's going very well. We have the floor on the main level that has the basement is put in place, so that's precast paint. Parking lot work is, like I said, gonna begin tomorrow, so we've kind of delayed that and we have capitalized on keeping the parking lot open and making as much revenue as we can. They are starting to dig for the underwater storm storage tanks in the driving range. So if you go by there, there's some very large hills by the driving range. That's because they're digging out so that the underground storage tanks there. Everything else is going along well, and we hope to have this building under a roof by December 15th. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so moving on to the remainder of our funds, really not a whole lot new here. Our capital projects expenditures are still hovering less than 14%. Really, that's just timing of when our bills are coming in for the golf club project. And MFT is expenditures are 101.9% of budget. You may remember that we had some intersection improvements that weren't included as part of the original budget that we did go ahead and approve. So that'll be part of our year-end budget amendments. And the pension funds are both on target about 75% of the way through the year. The debt service expenditures are only at 14% of budget. That was the first debt service installment that was done in June. Just a reminder, we do have the principal and interest payments due in early December. We make those payments in November, so we will not have enough property taxes in that account to make that payment. So we will have to do a transfer. Going back to our policies, we may need to bring something before the board for you to formally approve that transfer so that we can make that payment and then we can repay it once we get those property tax receipts back. On the personnel side of things, still running high on full-time salaries and benefits compared to last year. That's really because of those vacancies that we have filled. And then you can see the pension cost is lagging there at 312,000 because of the delay in property tax distributions that would normally be funneling into that base pension fund. And then lastly, on the inflation economic indicator standpoint, nothing new here, just to note that both of our commodities and contractual services are running less than last year and still within budgetary targets. Okay, and at this point, I will turn it to Sean for some good news. We have a proposed donation for the committee to hear about.
So as highlighted in the monthly treasury report, we have a funding support request that has been approved by the foundation to supply ballistic shields for each of our. For your information, a ballistic shield is a best practice identified by law enforcement for response to any critical incidents, i.e. an active threat, active shooter, that sort of thing. It allows personnel to rapidly stack up behind a shield, use that shield as a portable means of safely entering a location, identifying and eliminating threats, and also rendering aid to injured parties. Our current our current equipment that we have on hand does allow us to respond. But this will allow for a shield to be placed in every single vehicle on the street. So regardless of whatever time of day, regardless of whoever is working, that provides us a more readily available response. So that is pretty much it. It's an established best practice. The support request is for the material for the items themselves. Our staff has already been trained extensively as far as not only the use of, but also a trained trainer. So our internal training cadre has already received everything we need to put this into play.
And is the Public Safety Foundation doing this?
Yes.
Sean, repeat the value of the donation, value of the donation.
We have listed under 25,000.
Yeah, 22 or something like that.
No, it's 18 something.
Okay, sorry.
22 is the other.
Although they have your number.
Sorry.
So we are grateful to the Public Safety Foundation for doing this. I think our public safety officers and our residents will live the same.
Is there anything formal we need
Yes, in
to?
accordance with the donation policy, we do bring donations, anything from the Public Safety Foundation that's over 25,000 has to go to the Finance Committee, but because this is a significant donation, we're just looking for consensus from the committee that you're okay with accepting this donation before we go ahead and make that purchase.
Joe, any concern?
No, no concerns.
Thank you. All right, committee's in favor.
Right? It's wonderful.
Appreciate it.
Chief. Okay, any other questions on the treasurer's report before we move on to CIP? Okay, seeing that and moving right along. Let's read over to Marcia.
All right, so project's going to the village board for approval. You might remember me saying last month we were done and asking for approval on CIP projects, but there will be some change orders that we'll see throughout for the rest of the year. So that one is a change order for the golf clubhouse. There's a plumbing material change per Cook County requirements. They do not allow PVC within the building. So we want to update the plans throughout the permitting process to change all of our PVC to cast iron and copper. The significance of this is there's a lot of material labor associated with the change of material. It is a high cost. The reason we're bringing this to the board now is it's critical to keep construction moving forward. And it is the known change. So I know, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday. But we are continuing to seek relief on this change. So if we do, if we are granted a variance of material, at that point we can transfer or transition material within the building. Really reduce value of change order. We more into that later. Changes to the CIP timeline. There's two. The first one is the second floor council chambers. That construction has been delayed. I think you may have all heard about the snafu with the days. The update that we've received now is that they have to completely rebuild it, and they're expecting that to be delivered around Thanksgiving. So we're not anticipating that we'll be able to move into the chambers until January, but we're hoping that construction will be completed sometime in December, closing out all of that work. The second change to the timeline is the Village Hall EV charging stations. So just last month, you guys approved the contract for the construction of the charging stations. So remember, I think back in June or July, we purchased the equipment and then we awarded the contract last month. One of the final reports that came from ComEd, they are now telling us that we do not have the capacity available to us to install these charging stations. This is frustrating and disappointing. I think from, staff's perspective, there was a report that said we could do this, but it came with some footnotes that we didn't fully vet. And one of those was to say that they're not lying of the information provided in this report. And now they're saying they don't have the capacity. So what we've decided is we're really not comfortable moving forward at this time. What we need from ComEd is a true timeline on the infrastructure that they need to perform the upgrades and how long that will take. So we're still working through that with ComEd. They've been a bit hesitant to give us a final answer. I think one thing that's been kind of dominating some headlines recently is the AI data centers that are coming into this area. And a fun fact that I learned early last week is that with the projection of all these data centers, ComEd is going to have to essentially double the amount of energy that they produce in the Northeast region going on, which is just kind of crazy. And my concern is we're going up against that capacity. And so where do we fall in the priority of, equipment and just, processing our application and getting new infrastructure to support these EV charging stations. So the contract that was awarded last month, we have talked to that contractor. They agreed that they can hold most of the pricing that they have until next March. So right now we're on a tentative timeline until March. There's all their labor rates will stay the same. I think there's a couple things they'll need to purchase that may have a change in price next year. But for now, we're shooting towards March, but we still need answers from ComEd. Any questions? The last thing I want to know, and Margaret or the slideshow on the CIP timeline, I did make one change in general. You can see I highlighted in yellow. I added a new item to our legend, a CO for change order. So I retroactively went back and changed some of the village board approval check marks to COs. And then you'll see too, I proactively put in November, I'm anticipating a change order for Dundee Road. That project went on longer than we anticipated. And so the construction administrative support that we've received through our construction engineering consultant, they've come to us with additional costs. We're trying to put as much as those costs on our contract in Millennium as possible, but we do anticipate that there will be a change order for a portion of those. So I'm just saying November, it could be December, we're still negotiating, but that is another anticipated change order that will be coming for your.
Because of the delays on that project, I understand that we may have noticed them, that we may be looking at certain remedies in the contract because of the delays. Is that still the case?
Correct. So we will be applying liquidated damages, which is like a withholding of money for each day that they did not meet the schedule. And so I think as of right now, we have a tally of a certain number of days that we put them on notice for. Hey, you didn't meet the schedule on these certain days. Substantial completion, they have still not met either. And so I think one for final completion, sorry, which was at the beginning of October, they've still not met. Once that has met, then we'll kind of give them the total summary of all schedule.
Yeah, so there may be a positive CO versus what we anticipated.
Correct. That is just us withholding the funds from
Right.
their final payment. Yeah.
Right, but I'm just saying, but
Oh, yeah.
versus what we intended to spend, we may be spending a little less.
I'm not sure if this is for the lawyers or you, but so liquidated damages, are they a cap on the damages we get from them, or is that just a guaranteed minimum?
A cap per day.
Okay, so it's a fixed amount per day, so, but suppose we had some, we have some other damages which we've had to pay our, consultants to keep watching these guys. That's not going to be part of damages, it's just covered by the liquidated damages. Or, I mean, there are two choices, either the liquidated damages are it, or we get liquidated damages, but we can also try to get more.
Is this a closed ending topic?
Good point.
That's okay. I think we're good.
The exact question that you have I've been working with our village attorney on, and I think the term I used in that case was tiny double dip. And we
Okay.
charged them liquidated damages and
Okay, that's, there is a legal question.
There.
I've actually litigated that for $1 zillion when I was a younger guy, and who knows what the answer
Okay.
is. Okay,
When do you think the rest will be done? Do you know? What are goals?
So, yeah, we've been kind of stuck in a bad cycle right now with their subcontractor trying to finalize the details of the wall. We expect that once we have it scheduled, it will only take a couple weeks to complete. It's just that they keep asking for approval and we keep asking the same question, but they haven't provided us with enough data to grant them. So.
So we're still gonna handle it under this company.
Correct, yeah, we explored, would it be better, more timely to go outside the contract? The reality is it would be a lot more expensive than what we wanted to do. Yeah. Mhm. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. That's. Yeah,
Hey.
we can start talking about the budget.
We are going to go through, I was just joking, we're not gonna take you through every line item, but we are going to take you through the highlights. I know you're really disappointed. We are seeing what we've been doing. We are gonna hand it off to Phil here in just a second, so we can kind of talk high level with you, but we are going to just give you an overall summary to give you the basic story of the budget, how we landed here, talk through some revenue suggestions we have, unifying changes that we have. And then you'll get a chance to hear from each of the departments, you don't have to listen to me. And they will go through all of the budgetary highlights, and then we will wrap it up tonight with going through the community investment program or investment plan. Oh.
All right, so first of all, thank you all for taking the time to review the document. I have met with almost all of you one-on-one leading up to this evening, and I know there's been a lot of time spent by the board in reviewing this lengthy document, 330 some odd pages of information for you that is developed by our entire staff team, all of whom deserve some thanks and gratitude for doing something that is a little bit different this year, which is doing this 1 month earlier than we typically have. In normal years, we have presented this budget to you all in November and asked for your consideration of approval in December. And what that made for everybody was a very hectic November and December. And moving up the budget calendar by a month seems like it shouldn't be too big of a deal until you move up the budget calendar by a month and you realize all of the other things that displace the time that normally might be put toward development of this lengthy and important document. So I'm grateful to the staff team for being flexible and nimble in that effort. It is a labor of love for the staff to assemble the budget in the way that we do. And what we'll describe to you this evening is our thought process behind the departmental requests that are in tonight's budget or in tonight's presentation for next year's budget, and really trying to make sure that we're appropriately resourced for today and tomorrow. I mean, I think the biggest goal in the development of the budget obviously is to meet our day-to-day requirements that our community expects from the village. But importantly, along with that, that we are setting ourselves up for success in the future, not just looking at life in 12-month increments. The budget really is a step on the road not the only road. And each budget does lead into the next. And so there is a lot of thought and consideration put into when recommendations are made for staff, when recommendations are made for revenue, when recommendations are made on capital investments, that we're doing that in a way that is sustainable and thoughtful to meet needs in that long-term view. So that really meets the finance committee where it is from the standpoint of the monthly meetings that we have with you all, where we are talking about progress, where we are talking about our goals and making sure that we're achieving them. But we're also doing that in a way that is responsive to what's happening. The budget, while it is a 12-month look out into the future, is also something that has the benefit or ability or downside of changing, depending upon the circumstances that are in front of us. And so, like we talked about tonight, sometimes revenue streams that you expect don't happen in the way that they should. And so how do we make sure that our spending plan is both sustainable in an environment where we can't control all of the factors? So all of that is very much part of our thought process when we sit down to gut through these very lengthy discussions around needs. Up on the screen are really kind of the factors that we brought to our thinking in developing this budget. So when the story that I've been telling relative to the draft 2026 budget is that we're really focusing on continuing to invest in staff resources. And what you'll hear tonight a little bit later is where we believe the need is for those additional staff resources. It is unique for us to come to the board with requests for additional hands. We have historically been a very high-performing organization with as few people as possible. And what we are learning and discovering as we move through these changing times is that some of those areas just can't sustain with the same amount of staff support. And so we'll be talking to you about our needs in information technology. We'll be talking to you about our needs in engineering. And we're going to talk about the fact that we have a new clubhouse that'll come online in 2026 that will require an approach that we've never had to take before, which is a 12-month-a-year operation of the golf course. And what are the staff resources that are necessary for that? We are investing a lot in infrastructure next year. The biggest bulk of that infrastructure investment is in finishing the clubhouse project, but there are other things as well. Monica will walk you through a lot of those things. But what I would also point to is not just the bricks and mortar or the shovels in the ground work that 2026 is the story of, but also the planning for the future bricks and mortar and shovels in the ground work that is taking place. Talking through the second year of a stormwater master planning process, beginning the process of evaluating our street inventory so that we are resurfacing the right streets at the right time in the future, and working through better sets of data so that our decision making and ultimately what we are able to present to you all is justifiable based on what we know. It's a unique time. I don't need to say that in any other way from the standpoint of economic pressures that the village is facing. The world is a series of unknown equations that we are trying to solve for. And we're going to do the best we can. And what we've tried to do with this budget is be practical in the realities of the world that are out there. And as I've mentioned, when we have our monthly finance committee reports, we're going to see how well we're doing given the uniqueness of the environment that we're operating in. But we do see continued growth in some of those areas, certainly in the areas of commodity costs and contractual services, but also in staffing. And I think that's been a big change over time as well. We talked about it from the standpoint of vehicles. I heard a statistic on the news this morning that the average price of a new vehicle in 2025 is 25% higher than it was in 2020. The average price of a new vehicle that a consumer buys is now over $50,000 for the first time ever. We have seen that in our development of the budget when we think about fire apparatus, when we think about public works equipment. We have had to dial up nearly every vehicle replacement cost to meet what the market is essentially demanding. And that's a unique challenge to today, but not one that seems to be going away. So it may have just ratcheted up, and that's what the world's going to look like. But we'll be talking through that. We've also tried to propose to you fee and tax increases that are practical and realistic based off of what we anticipate our needs for investment are and what we anticipate our needs for the cost of operations on a day-to-day basis. We did hear a public comment earlier this evening in reference to our volumetric water rates increasing 40 or so % over the last 5 years. That's not an incorrect statement. And as you may all recall, we have a rate analysis that was done back in 2016 that essentially told us we're going to need to increase those rate structures to meet the needs of our infrastructure investments, our critical and necessary infrastructure investments. But we're practical when we think about what that means. And we want to be mindful of the fact that every 1% of increase in those fees is real and tangible to our residents who live in this community and who are bound by the decisions that the board will ultimately make, but by the recommendations that staff is also making to you. So when we walk through that in a few minutes, you will see kind of the thought process that went behind it. I want to just point out, this is also a unique year because it is our first budget that we've developed under the new umbrella of being a home rule municipality. The staff's recommendations coming to you this evening are in line with the commitments that the village board made following that referendum back in November of 2024. And that is that the property tax levy will not increase above the property tax limitations set by the state of Illinois. That 2.9% increase that we'll talk about in a moment is that limit. And wherever possible, we have tried to hold the line on rate structures to that limit or below it. We've also worked to try to look at our rate structure to simplify it, to get rid of things that aren't practical or realistic for our community anymore, and be mindful of the fact that there may be better ways than just new revenues to meet the needs of the organization on a going forward basis. That is always a front of mind concept. Overall, what I think you're going to hear tonight is that we are working to always provide to you a prudent spending plan that means that we can also meet the expectations of the community. That's getting more difficult. It's never been easy, but I will say the unique environment that we're operating within certainly makes it somewhat more complex as we move through things. So I'm going to hand it off to our more than capable staff. I will shut up. You probably won't hear my voice a whole lot more this evening. And I think that's important for a lot of reasons, but mostly because these are the individuals who manage this budget on a daily basis. And our department heads and their support staff and Nikki and the entire finance team are among the best that you will ever see in municipal service. And it is an honor to work with all of them and to see their work come together to generate this very thick document that you all have committed to memory already, which is why we don't have to go through it line by line. And with that, I'm going to hand it off, I think, to Margaret. Yes, okay.
By the way, I put me under.
Did you?
On your question.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew you would.
Manager Crowley, and I'd just like to echo those thoughts in terms of the staff effort that it's taken to generate this book. We do print it in-house, and it takes a village to make this happen. So I'm very appreciative to everybody for their help. As we go through the budget tonight, we'll give you page numbers so you can follow along and flip along with us if you'd like. You don't have to. But we'll tell you what you need to know. We're joking a lot about line items, but if there is something specific that we don't cover, please stop us and ask. And that's really what tonight's meeting is about, to make sure that you're comfortable with what we propose. There we go. I'm going to start with the budget summary that starts on page 72. It's tagged as the budget summary tab, so very easy to find. Almost second from the bottom. first halves. So pages 72 through 78, I'll touch a little bit more on this later, but I'm just gonna give you a high level summary right now. Total operating funds, in terms of budget is just over 52 million on revenue and 58 million in expenditures. In looking at that on its surface, it looks like the balance, we have a structural deficit there. But there is a very purposeful use of that excess. Our fund balance policies do allow us to spend down fund balance reserves for one-time capital projects. And when I say one-time, pretty much every year we have spend down of fund balance for capital, but it is designed for those non-recurring expenses. Really, we do not want to balance our ongoing operating budget, staffing, and the services that we provide on reserves. So we do separate that out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just to highlight a few things, we are planning on using about 2.2 million in general fund reserve next year. About 200,000 of the motor fuel tax reserve for capital, obviously the golf club fund reserve. We have 2.3 million that's slated for a transfer. We'll ultimately determine that dollar amount next year when we see how all of the costs and donations shake out. We've been fortunate. The Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club have been very successful in raising funds. So our goal is to leave Stella with as much golf club fund reserve as we possibly can. But the reality is we will have to transfer some of those fund reserves to cover a portion of the cost of that project. The capital fund reserve, it proposes about 15.2 million. Obviously, the bulk of that is the general obligation bonds that were earmarked for the golf club. But we are also planning a general obligation bond issue next year. So that's included, a portion of that's included in this number as well. And then water fund reserve. We also have an alternate revenue bond plan for next year to fund the next 3 years of water main projects. So part of that is spending down those bond proceeds once they're received. When we look at the budget holistically, adding in the pension funds, our total revenues are 58.3 million or 58.4, and then just shy of 63 million in expenditures. We leave those numbers out, those totals out when we're talking about the operational budget, because there's very little control that we have over the pension funds. It's all determined by statute, whether you're a home rule or not. Those pension fund benefits are protected by the Illinois Constitution, so we do have to follow compiled statutes on those. And lastly, we will be talking about the 10-year community investment plan, but just looking at it at a high level. The 10-year plan is 92.1 million over the next 10 years, with 19.5 million funds in CY 2026, with the lion's share of that being the golf club. And as I mentioned, we have 2 bond issues proposed for next year to fund those in surplus. So I'm taking, I don't know if that page numbers, right? 72, okay. So the graph on page 72, Margaret and I were talking about this, we might be changing the way that we show the golf club on here, but just taking you from left to right in the book, you can see how we got to the projected fund balance numbers. As part of the preparation of the budget, we asked each of the departments to give us their year-end estimates of what they think they're going to spend. And then Margaret and I take a look at revenues, and we think what we anticipate in receiving in revenues. The result of that net gives us our projected fund balance, and that's where we start in terms of budgeting. So that's the projected fund balance as of 12/31. Obviously, that number will change as we get to 12/31, hopefully not too drastically. Then we have our projected revenue numbers as a total, and then our projected operating expenses, and then our operating surplus and deficit. And again, that golf club number is a little misleading because that includes a one-time capital transfer. So we'll change that and how that looks in the final budget. And then you can see in the red column, the one-time capital expense. So those are all the items that are identified in the capital plan, that 19.5 million, and we'll go through those in greater detail. And then importantly, in the far right purple column, you can see where our fund balances are projected to end. And we'll talk a little bit more about how this looks spread out over the next 5 years, so that we can ensure that this budget is sustainable if we move forward with all of the expenses as proposed. If everything goes as planned, wish I was that good, but just in terms of projections, the general fund will end the year with a 36.5% fund balance, which is about 4 months of operating expenses. The water fund will be actually above 100%, but that's because we plan to issue bonds next year. And that money will be spent over the next 3 years. On the revenue side, this is on page 774. This chart shows the summary of revenue compared to prior years, and also the totals by fund. Obviously, out of the 52 million, the lion's share of our general fund revenue, our lion's share of our revenue goes into the general fund. This is the largest proportion of the budget. We'll spend quite a bit of time going through the general fund tonight. This is where all of our operating departments live, aside from the golf fund and the water fund, which are, those are our proprietary funds. To give you an idea of just the total volume of spend, our capital projects fund is number 2 in terms of expenditure numbers. Obviously, again, the golf club project is the lion's share of that. And then what the water fund comes in at a close third. That's really our second largest operating fund to the general fund, where we still budget staff in operations for the water plant and the water distribution system. On the expenditure side, the pages that follow 75, 76, there's a similar summary of expenditures by fund compared to prior years. And then on page 76, as the expenditures detailed out by project or by department and by category. So if you're looking for just kind of a snapshot of the budget as a whole of where the dollars are going, that's a good chart to look at in terms of just categories where we're putting our resources. Again, the largest operating fund is the general fund. That's where the lion's share of expenditures are coming from. And then the golf capital projects fund comes in at a distant second with the capital projects that are planned for next year. Great. And now
I
go
I have
ahead.
a quick question. We'll be talking later this week about library project, issuing library bonds, lots of bonds for the library, but there really are general obligation bonds. to village. Any of this currently, since that's not been approved yet, encompass that in terms of debt service or anything else?
Does not assume that we will repay any of that. I don't believe the library will, given the size of the bond issue that they're proposing, they cannot sustain that debt service payment. That would drastically change our repayment schedule if we were including that. Certainly something that we could look at, the ultimate structure of the bond. But it's not included.
Because I raise it simply because I wasn't sure when to raise it, but in general, for example, our monthly charts, we get that nice chart, shows what our anticipated bond financings are, how high we're gonna go, et cetera. And really, which is something we haven't done for many years, we're talking about another substantial bond issue that is on our balance sheet, because it is for S&P purposes and general purposes and otherwise. I think we ought to be able to get that chart, show it, so that we can see what the totality is. People will certainly see it, if it gets approved, in terms of if we ask for a referendum down at the bottom per se, but advisory referendum. I just want to make sure that people that are looking at these things have the information so they can make a good decision.
So now I'm gonna hand it over to Adam. He's going to provide an overview of our strategic plan, which was also one of the driving forces in preparing this budget. One of the themes that you'll see as we start talking through the development budgets is that a lot of the initiatives in here are directly tied to the strategic plan that we laid out in 2025.
Thank you, Deputy Manager Larson. The village's strategic plan continues to move forward with steady progress across all initiatives. Overall, we're about 1/3 complete with most initiatives either on track or entering their next phase. We've begun key projects, including the water supply analysis, which would examine and support future water supply discussions. The village's first comprehensive stormwater master plan. Both of these initiatives will guide future investment in essential infrastructure systems in the village. We've also continued our technology upgrades across all departments to improve security, efficiency, and service reliability. We will begin a comprehensive technology plan later in 2026. Our newly reconstituted business services team will begin their efforts with the upcoming business and liquor license renewal process later this fall. We'll transition to retention visits early in 2026. The team continues building strong relationships with our local business community and is working increasing our occupancy in the downtown business area. A recent fee and tax analysis presented as part of this budget process informs our financial decisions for the future. It works towards a reduction on the reliance of taxes and fees borne by our residents. Our community engagement efforts persist as we completed an evaluation that identified programs that would provide a variety of that would satisfy a variety of public interests and demographics. The evaluation resulted in several recommendations that will be incorporated into the final community engagement event plan, which is expected to be completed soon. The village's first sustainability action plan is in development and is on track for completion in 2026, which advances our long-term sustainability as a community and our resilience goals. We're continuing to invest in our people through leadership development with a focus on staff training. Our human resources team is beginning a compensation and benefits analysis in 2026 to support recruitment and retention. New tools like the staff intranet and updated Public Safety Commission rules have strengthened communication across departments and made our recruitment process more efficient. The village continues to make measurable progress towards our strategic plan goals. We're carrying strong momentum into 2026. We'll continue our focus as an organization on what we must accomplish as part of this plan. Thank you.
Strategic plan. Page 24. We did go through the financial forecast. Last month, the finance committee, but for those folks watching at home or anybody that's new to the conversation, the financial forecast is really what drives whether or not the budget is sustainable, and we look at that over the next 5 years. There's a very in-depth written analysis of each of our funds, the revenues and expenditures, what we are projecting and why. We talk about our salary projections, benefit projections, which is really one of the largest areas in terms of expenditures. Obviously, we're a service organization, so you would expect personnel to be one of our largest expenses outside of infrastructure expense. On page 36 is the debt service projection that Chair Rubin was referring to, just showing what our 10-year CIP would be in terms of financing, what we are projecting that we would need to finance the plan as it is today. And then we also have a historic high watermark that was previously in 2008. That was the highest debt service payment that the village had sustained in at least our reportable history. We adjust that limit for CPI every year just to see how we're behaving accordance with that historic high. With the issuance of the golf bonds, we did know that we were going to start creeping up on that historic high. And you can see how it stacks up over the years. As with most forecasts, this is really just a warning sign. It's not a guarantee. It's information for the committee and the board to consider as we move forward of when we issue debt and how much of debt we issue. going forward and what that would look like in terms of payments. And we certainly have flexibility, especially now as a home rule unit, as to how we structure that financing. The other meat of the forecast is on page 38 through 40. We do go through our major funds, our general fund, our water fund, our NFT fund. That's really where your significant infrastructure operating expenses are. And you can see how we sustain fund balance within our policy through 2030 in the general fund. We get right up to that 25% marker in terms of fund balance. So if everything goes as planned, if we get all of our CIP projects on time, and we draw down on the schedule that we're proposing, we will end up with 6 million in the general fund balance by 2030 and close of 2030, and that will be butting right up against the fund balance policy that the board has set. So again, this is really not any guarantees. It's just a forecast to project where we're headed and also to show that the budget as projected today is sustainable.
Well, and just out of curiosity, once again, just today, right now, we're sitting there with how many millions of dollars in tax bills not out there being paid? What's the number? Almost 6? Okay, so I just want to point out, because I've said in the past that I think 25% is too low. It's a practical matter. And especially as we go out a few more years and our operating expenses are going up, et cetera, and the effect of delays and getting property tax bills are will be even worse. I think we need to keep that in mind. That would barely fund the delay for any extended period of time. I mean, we'd really be getting close, too close, in my, as a personal thought. Thank you.
Something, to your point, that is something that we may need to revisit with the committee in terms of policies. I know we've also talked, we're going to talk in a moment about financial policies, so I won't go down that road, but that is a conversation that we probably need to revisit.
And just to make a note that the follow up in case anyone misunderstands, that we get down to that number in part by making some pretty substantial capital expenditures from what would otherwise be operating revenues or current savings. And that may be what we need to revisit. It's not that we're, have a deficit spending policy or anything like that.
An important point to make. And that is part of our criteria as we prepare a budget that comes before the board for consideration, but then also if we look how this will impact us over the next 5 years is to make sure that's sustainable from an operating standpoint, that we can, any staff that we have, any ongoing operations, the existing service offerings that we have are sustainable for the next 5 years, regardless of capital. So we do have flexibility in terms of, some flexibility in terms of the timing of a lot of that. The other item that I just wanted to mention affecting the forecast, obviously we've talked a lot about inflation and supply costs with the finance committee this year, and just some uncertainty of where that could be. A lot of our costs seem to have leveled off, but they've leveled off high. So we're sustaining that level and we're looking at sustaining that level in the financial forecast over 5 years. Obviously, we're prioritizing infrastructure improvements in this 5-year plan and in this budget, but also trying to be mindful of potential state budget impacts. On page 41, we do have some revenue loss scenarios that just, if we were to lose revenue, what would that look like and what would the impact be over the life of the forecast? Again, this is just informational or scenario planning for a worst case scenario or just something that's unforeseen, which has happened in the past with the state of Illinois. The other item that we've talked about that's not in here because we just don't know what it's going to look like are potential changes to the public safety pension legislation. We've talked a lot about this with the finance committee, that the state is in the same boat as us, that any enhancements to the tier 2 benefit structure will also cost the state of Illinois money. So they're in the same boat as us of how will they fund it if they make any changes. We are still hearing that there will be changes at some point. We just don't know when. So at that point, when that does happen, that could have the potential to change this forecast drastically and would require additional conversations with the committee. We are accounting for debt financing for infrastructure needs in this 5-year forecast, again, not the library, so it's a good catch. And there also are not any debt financing structures related to anything that we would change potentially with the Public Works Garage. If that facility changes locations or there's a new facility constructed, that's not included in the forecast either. We've also focused on designing fee structures around cost. Margaret will talk a lot about that. We did do a very in-depth fee and fine analysis this year, and she'll go through all the recommendations that came out of that. But those are also included in here as well. You can see on page 38, we highlighted in red the 2 major revenues that we are proposing to change. Places for eating to convert to food and beverage, and then also the imposition of the new home sales tax. And we'll talk about this. On the next page. So back here. There we go. As
Before
we-
you change subject, I don't want to, I'm not disagreeing with trustee Rubin on the fund balances. Because, yeah, we can see we're sort of right up, potentially right up against it. On the other hand, we did get the public comment, the gist of which is we shouldn't be taking our residents' money and, you know, putting a shotgun away for a rainy day. So we have to balance those 2 things, right? And, you know, because there are only 2 ways for us to increase the fund balances. One of them, of course, is to spend less, but a lot of what we do, we think is essential spending. And the other is somehow to take less revenue from our residents. To the extent we want to take more revenue from our residents for fund balances, I'm just going to guess that the resident who came in, he would say, wait a minute, that's my money. What are you doing that for?
Right.
So we have to balance those 2
Right.
things.
The same resident might be shocked if we miss the payment that we have.
I understand and I don't disagree, but we've got to,
Yeah, no, absolutely, there's a balance. There's no
when
question.
we say,
Totally.
when
I
we
agree.
say it is terrible that the property tax bills have not gone out, which it sort of is. On the other hand, hey, I haven't had to pay my property taxes. So that's what we have to balance.
Different perspectives.
Yeah, and we are both of them.
Yes.
We're all both of them.
And that is the perfect segue into my next slide. As Manager Crowley mentioned, we are abiding by the PTEL cap of 2.9%. That number is put forth by the Department of Revenue every year in line with CPI change from December to December. This is in line with the board's commitment to abide by PTEL. We did prepare the property tax levy the same way we have in years past. We do account for new growth, which is primarily going to be the new homes that are coming in with Forest Edge, but it also accommodates for anyone that's renovated their home or added significant value to their home in the last year. So we do capture that additional amount. In theory, when you spread that increase over the village, it equates to a 2.9%. When you see the property tax levy on Thursday night, you'll see that percentage is slightly higher than 2.9% to account for that new growth. Now, in actual reality, when the assessments are calculated, increases are not all the same. So that's just kind of a caveat in general. Some property taxes, those will go up, some will go down, just depending on what's going on around them. But our request is essentially 2.9% in accordance with PTEL. We have a similar increase to garbage fees. Our sales tax projections remain strong. That's really based off of recent changes in legislation and what we've been seeing in trend. And on the reverse side, we see use tax declining, PPRT is declining, and telecom tax has been declining as well. So that's all reflected in the forecast and in this budget. We're seeing utility tax and vehicle licenses to be relatively stable. To Howard's point, we're actually proposing the elimination of a fee this year, getting rid of annual alarm permit licensing. I think many residents don't even know that that's a thing, but we are getting rid of that in lieu of making other suggestions to control false alarms on the high end. As we talked about extensively already, water charges are projected to increase over the 5-year forecast to support our infrastructure plans. Obviously, if that 10-year CIP changes, those rate increases will change along with it. We're projecting building permit fees to increase. And then we talked extensively about these 2 new taxes. The thing that these 2 new taxes have in common is that they're both targeted to folks that not only live in town, but also visitors and people that work here. This is in line with also the commitment that the board made to try to reduce our reliance on property taxes and go with revenue sources that will impact folks that do not live here. Questions on the forecast? Okay, moving right along. So page 43 to 55 are the calendar year 2026 financial policies. These were reviewed with the Finance Committee in July. Full detail on all the policies can be found in the budget. We talked at length about the property tax levy, but I just want to note that we are recommending in this budget and in the financial forecast throughout the 5 years that we continue to abate the water bonds. So that is a cost that is paid through the water rate structure, not passed on through the property tax levy. Because when we issue alternate revenue bonds, we issue them with a geo backing. We could issue a levy for those if we chose to, but we choose not to. So we are recommending again that we fund those debt service payments through the water fund.
And that's so the point of the open comment, that one of the things we're paying for with that rate increase.
Correct, exactly. On the pension funding side, the police pension contribution, we had the actuary come to the finance committee. That's a 6.9% increase. So that contribution is included in here at 3.4 million. Again, in the forecast, that number could change depending on what happens with legislation. And then fire pension is to continue to fund on a paid basis. We talked about our insurance pools, both health insurance and risk management. Those reserve policies are that we can use those one-time reserves if they qualify as a safety-related expense or a wellness-related expense. The 2026 budget does propose using some of our UMA reserves, which is climbed up over 2 million now, to offset our premium increase in 2026. So the last direction we got from the finance committee was to start to draw down those reserves. And this is an appropriate use of those funds in accordance with our policy. And then Margaret will go through the fee and fine changes in detail. Give it over to Margaret.
Good evening. Thank you, Deputy Manager Larson. So please reference pages 50 through 70 of the budget book for the fee and fine detail. The budget book does have detailed charts and for each of these categories. I'm going to go through this evening for current rate and then the phone's great. Nice to see it as a visual in the book. So as part of our annual budget development process, as you heard this evening, staff reviews our various fees, fines, and charges for village services. As in previous years, this past summer, our staff distributed a fee survey to surrounding communities. We collected data that would allow staff to analyze and compare the fees, fines, and charges from other municipalities to us. And then we review those fees, fines, and charges as a collective and compare them to the actual cost of services based on review of the data received. This year has several proposed fees, some a little bit more than usual, so we'll go through them in some detail. Please stop me if you have any questions. Another item to note, as was mentioned earlier, this has been one of the items that was part of the strategic plan and also the consideration of now being a home rule community. We took that into account when we were asking questions of other communities to gain more insight into fees that could be charged if now that we're home rule. But obviously, as we've stated tonight, only 2 increases to new fees have been added to the budget, but there's other ones we've explored and that may come forth through future budgets. As it was noted, our water rates are increasing by 7%.
Questions?
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, kind of a overriding
Yes.
feeling. There's this concept in public administration for fee for service. I sense that we're moving more toward that model over time, especially in the water area. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
That's, I mean, it's an oversimplification, but it's that
Yes.
kind of thing. And I think
Yes.
that's appropriate to our community.
Thank you. We took your comments from the last discussion when we were talking through the projection and incorporated those.
Okay.
So our water volumetric rates and fixed charges are being increased by 7%. And this is consistent with the recommendation of our current water rate study. We took that internal model and adjusted it for what additional revenue we would have. But also we do have still delayed distribution system updates that we're still catching up and paying for those increased costs of the operating of the water system. Sanitary sewer rates, we're proposing to increase by 8%. This is to meet the cost of mandates that are being pushed out from MWRD. And there's also $7.9 million scheduled in sewer related infrastructure improvements over the next 10 years that's incorporated into our 10-year CIP. There's other small fees related to water administration and miscellaneous fees that are detailed in your budget book. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to speak to those this evening. The general collection service fee is increasing by 2.9%, which is in line with the CPI increase. This is to ensure consistent and adequate funding resources in the future to be able to fund all the programs that collection services fee was created for initially, especially for the subsidy for road infrastructure. For building and other permit fees, building permit revenue is a significant annual source for our village. It is almost 8.5% of the revenue for the general fund. The current fee for new single family construction is $8.25 per square foot. And we're proposing that fee increase in $9 per square foot, which is just under a 10% increase. And this also keeps us in line with comparable communities. As Deputy Larson stated earlier, our burglar and fire alarm fees we are proposing a larger change in this fee. Just to give you some background, we have ordinances that allow a fee to be charged when the residential or commercial fire or burglary alarm is activated without cause, a false alarm. And previously, the first two instances were free, and then we had a dynamic pricing structure as the fee would escalate as more false alarms would occur. This is to deter people from continuing to have false alarms, because every time a false alarm is activated, our staff does have to respond full with all of our gear and our vehicles, just as if it was a true alarm. We had not increased these fees often in the past. And as part of the 2026 budget process, staff really sat down and looked at the information around the permitting and occurrence billing for these fire alarm false alarms, and decided that based on how the data that was being collected was used, how this process of completing the alarm permitting process and billing process was done, it turned out it's a very manual and arduous process. And it involves both the public safety department doing analysis and then the finance department doing analysis, billing, and the collection of those fees. Talking through how the data was used, we believe that this fee is kind of becoming obsolete, and staff recommends eliminating the initial license for the annual permit license, the renewal of the license, and also the connection alarm fees from third and fifth false alarms for residents. So basically, we are not going to be charging a fee for a false alarm until someone has over 6 false alarms. But with that being said, we would increase that cost from $150 to $200 for anything over 6. And then we would continue to increase the fees over that. So 9 through 11 would be from $300 to $350, 12 through 14 false alarms would be $500 to $550, and 15 alarms or more, if we would continue to charge the maximum that our fee and fine schedule allows, which is $750. This is really to enforce on these egregious false alarm occurrences, to make them come into compliance with the village and to not have them have false alarms, get their alarm systems correct and working accurately.
Yeah, seems that 6 might still be too many to give as freebies to me. I don't know, is that
right.
something like? Yeah, staff gearing up, they could be addressing something more critical if they're just. Reason why we decided 6, why can't we just go back to 3 or?
It was just the process of the three actually is a very common, over three is a very common occurrence. But it's kind of like we would see more, I know Deputy Early can speak, just see more egregious people getting up over that 6 where it's actually costing the village more. Just to finish my one statement is, we would like to look at the municipal code to change this to more of a violation versus a fee and fine structure. And what that would mean is we would approve this here in the budget, draft budget for 2026, but move to putting it more as like a ticket. So at any point in time, public safety, if there was somebody who was having numerous fees, we could base it on that structure versus this fee and fine structure. So that's kind of where we're looking forward in the future, to still stop people from having these frequent false alarms.
But still, that's fixed, that would be the violation.
Well, we could, at that point in time, if it was a violation, we could do it at any point in time.
I think the number one goal is to try to, it's mainly with fire alarm systems and try to gain compliance and get those customers to fix their alarm systems. So,
These are the businesses, right? Mostly that do it.
mostly with the fire alarms, yes.
Is there a recommendation to look at it, to go back to?
These ways, I feel like is you're out.
But is there any match? I guess the question you're asking is why 6? Like, is there any data? Like you specifically said that with 3, that's sort of a common number.
I would say a common number more with households though.
Right.
And then it gets, and then it gets more egregious with
It's
the,
not common to get to 6 or more, mainly apartment buildings and like you mentioned, businesses, restaurants, sometimes might have more.
So we're okay with going out up to 5 times with no fee. Your 6 and a half is okay with being interrupted.
I think part of the concern is that we don't want alarm systems being disconnected because of concerns about false alarms.
I see, okay.
I mean, we could revisit and do an analysis of how many times that occurs.
It's just.
This is an aggregate concept. This is not is there a time element involved?
Per year.
Per year. Per calendar year.
And you have a schedule that goes up to how many times a year?
over 15.
So it's, oh my goodness.
We don't get there very frequently.
I think at least in the last decade, it's only happened once to get up to 50.
Yeah.
And that was with an apartment building that was actually trying to fix it.
Everyone's being very polite. This is a really complicated thing to administer. And one of the reasons that we said 6 is because it takes a lot of staff time to administer, not just to respond. So I think
To
our-
5, to
Right,
actually.
to actually-
just to actually go through the process, and it is literally not that frequent. So that's where we got to the gap.
Thank you.
So moving on, I'll talk about the Glencoe Golf Club fee increases for this year. There's a modest increase across several categories. Driving range bucket fees will increase by $1 for both the weekday and weekend play. Driving range cards will increase by $15 each. Electric and pull cart rentals will increase by $1 each. And senior membership cards will now be $40. Then we still have that dynamic pricing model in place for some of the categories. And so you'll see that when I say it's increased by $1, it's the dynamic pricing that is increased by $1, but still we can use that price. Next is the ambulance fees. The public safety department charges for transportation and treatment in the village's ambulances. And based on analysis of the survey results from the other communities and then looking at our financial information, we previously had increased those costs in 2023. However, our costs responding to those calls has been increased, and so we are recommending a slight increase in our ambulance billing service fees this year. So also put us in line with other municipalities in the area.
It's typically an impact to insurance. Not direct billing very, much, if ever.
Correct. One quick thing to note, so for commuter parking permit rates, and this is we're proposing an annual and quarterly commuter parking permit increase from $270 to $300 for the annual permit and $75 to $100 for the quarterly permit. And that's to cover maintenance costs related to the village's 10-year community investment plan. This will also have to be, if the board is okay with this fee increase, also have to be approved by Union Pacific Blue Police, which we've done in the past.
Just compare to other municipalities.
Very comparable. It's actually kind of lower than a lot of the areas that have same kind of fees.
You know, do we have any information on whether it's Glencoe residents or residents from elsewhere that are using our train station lines?
And that might be a data factor.
We can find that data for you.
You know, if it, not that I want to be parochial, but if it's all Glencoe people, I'll think one thing. But if it's a bunch of people from, Highland Park or Northbrook or whatever, I think something different.
So that's particularly important as we think about how we use those spaces to support the downtown businesses and who's using those spaces for commuter parking.
Restricted questions similar to the golf course, that we do have a restriction, we cannot charge different between residents.
And I think you're suggesting we may boost it
Yeah.
if there's.
No, I know what
yeah.
I'm saying. I'm just-
The annual permits, we can identify where they're from, but the daily passes are more difficult to identify that.
We did increase daily fees 2 years ago or last year?
2 years.
2 years ago.
So would there be, because of the virtual stickers for Glencoe cars, would that help us figure out even daily, whether it's a daily person, it's a Glencoe person? Right. It seems like-
We're transitioning our ticketing system, so that's a component that we can look more closely at during the course of the year.
One last item was just the parking violation rates. We have not increased these fees in a very long time, and so we're looking at them and looking at the comparable community costs for parking violations. And so we are proposing to increase those fees, and you can see the table 9 in your budget. The most common first through fifth parking violation is currently $25. We're looking to increase that to $50. And pretty much all the other items are going up by $25 as well. One other thing to note, to be consistent, we will be charging late fees that are going to be double the cost of the ticket. There was an old structure in place where sometimes as you got higher up with your amount of tickets, the late fee was not consistently the same. And so we're just going to make that a consistent process for all the, related to all the fees that we usually have, that late fees usually double. I'm just thinking that up.
And being comparable to our neighbors.
Very comparable, right in line with our very close neighbors. And then this is also something that, this is to gain compliance. And as we're talking about the business district streetscape plan, basically get people used to parking where they should be. So talking about new fees that are proposed, this was discussed last month at Finance Committee. So credit card fees, we typically absorb all the credit card and administration fees related to our third-party vendors for credit cards. And we are proposing that beginning in 2026, these fees will be passed directly to customers and order align standard municipal practices ensure that general operating revenues are not used to subsidize individual payment methods. This implementation will occur in phases to allow for the reprogramming of village software systems and websites and make sure that any printed material that references payment information is accurate. So we do have a small amount in our 2026 budget for some credit card fees, just in case we still haven't been able to roll all of them out of our costs in our.
And to remind the committee, currently the aggregate annual amount is approaching what, couple $100,000?
It is between water fund and general fund costs for credit cards, and there's a substantial amount in the water fund related to utility billing. And just a note for residents watching at home, if you sign up for auto pay, where that money is directly debited from your bank account, that is a free service the village has, and you can always pay by cash or check, and there's a very convenient box outside, which I think is black now. The black box outside next to the post office where you can drop your check off at any point in time. And lastly, Public Works did a comparison to the village street opening fee, permit fees through the fee and fine survey. And based on the results of the survey, it's recommended to require a $2,500 deposit for all street openings and introduce a new pavement degradation fee. This is a common way of saying this new fee we're adding to our schedule. The existing fees for street openings under 60 square feet and for each additional 10 square feet will be removed. And we're going to put these new fees in place, which are basically to help the village recoup costs when newly resurfaced or restored streets are cut open, ensuring the expense of a premature pavement damage is not borne to our general taxpayers. It will be directly related to the person's project who's interrupting the street. And so that is also included in your fee schedule tonight. And if you have any further questions, they're available for those.
Yes, can you mention sidewalk fees? Are sidewalks incorporated degradation, or is this just for streets?
Oh, that's a very good catch.
It's just, that's my thing. My next question is, is your deposit refundable deposit, or is it?
Yes.
Fee? Why?
Yes, because it's a deposit, it will be refundable. So as soon as they are able to finish restoring the street, then they would come in and get an inspection. And then they would be able to be eligible to get that deposit back.
So we expect them to the degradation fees. Because it used to be 2,500 fee period. Right, it used to be. Yeah, and then to expect the new fees to be at least that much, if not more, for opening. I think for new development or redevelopment, when it's based on the width of the lot, it's comparable, but like a singular street. It'll be less.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have you thought about how that fee would work with the lead service line project?
Yes, great question. So we're trying to use this fee as an incentive for residents who have lead service lines to get their service lines replaced prior to a resurfacing project. So we're going to be sending out letters that specifically are informing our lead service owners of these new fees. And then once streets are selected to be resurfaced, they'll be getting a letter that year prior as well. To say, now is your last chance, your street will be resurfaced next year. You need to replace your lead service line within 3 years following your street resurfacing, there will be a fine. Right now, we waive all permit fees when it comes to lead service line replacements. As part of our cost sharing program, this fee will not be waived. So this would be something that we have given you adequate warning. We have asked you to be proactive. And so even in the event of emergency replacement, we would waive other fees, but this fee would.
Hypothetical. You're persuasive, everybody agrees, and then we've run out of blood. So they can't get their credit because we were capped.
Gotcha.
So we should think, I don't know if it's gonna
We
happen.
may have to cross that bridge when we get
I
there.
don't know if it'll happen,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't wanna say,
I think if that were the case, we would come back to the board and talk about
Okay.
a specific scenario.
good, okay, let me thought about it.
Yeah.
Of course.
As we head into the operating budgets, just to give you some context of what we are going to be going through. We're going to start with the departments within the general fund. And again, you'll see that the lion's share of the budget funds are coming out of the general fund at 28 million, with the public safety department being just shy of 13 million. Public Works Department at 8, and at finance at 2, development services at 1. The golf fund and the water fund this year are very similar.
Numbers from
Those numbers are
the
wrong.
water fund number is 5,796,14.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Doesn't match. Okay, but you can see that the water fund is primarily split between the water production fund and the water distribution fund, and then the golf fund is a combination of the divisions. We'll go through that separately. So we start with the general fund. The departments will go through each of their categories and what the highlights are, and then we'll head into our operational funds. We'll go to golf and then water.
Just so you know, the golf number is 4,834,830.
Parking budget detail starts on page 84. And a bunch of Adam to start with park administrations and finance department, start on 85.
Thank you, Deputy Manager Larson. Again, as Deputy Manager Larson mentioned, the ad 5 budget begins at 85 and runs through page 105 of the budget book. But you'll find detailed information for department budget there. Our department is made up of 7 divisions. It comprises of the administration, legal, boards and commissions, finance, human resources, information technology, and risk management divisions. The department calendar budget request totals just north of $6.2 million, representing an overall increase of $613,000 or 10.9% in the calendar year 2025 budget. This increase is primarily attributed to personnel-related costs, including the addition of a new IT systems administrator, reclassification of the technology and strategy manager position to an IT director, and additional professional consulting services to support special projects related to strengthening our cybersecurity and streamlining our internal operations. The department includes 15 budgeted positions, including the village manager for calendar year 2026. As I previously mentioned, the IT systems administrator position represents the sole new personnel request for this budget. Our administration and finance team had a productive year, and I'd like to share a few key accomplishments. And you can find the details of many more accomplishments on page 100 through 101 of the budget book. First, I'd like to mention, this being the finance committee, that we have again maintained the highest level of recognition for our financial documents. We've received the Government Finance Officers Association's Triple Crown Award for our reporting and our processes as it relates to our financial documentation. We've completed the issuance of the Series 2025 General Obligation Bonds to fund the Glencoe Golf Club project, which was approved by our voters in April of 2023. We've launched the Downtown Streetscape and Parking Study, which will help guide us for the future decisions about both public and private investments in our downtown. We continue our work on the village's first sustainability action plan, which is expected to be completed next year in 2026. Will help advance our long-term resilience goals. Finally, we updated the Public Safety Commission rules, streamlining the hiring process and improving efficiency for our recruitment for our public safety department. Our 2020, looking ahead, our 2026 department work plan maintains our focus, as the village manager mentioned, personnel development and community investment. A few notable elements of our work plan, which can be found on page 102 and 103, include completing the series 2026A and 2026 bond issues, which will fund a range of capital and water fund projects. We will upgrade our village's IT infrastructure to enhance our network stability, reliability, and resilience. We will participate in a comprehensive review and update of the business license regulations in the municipal code. We will continue to strengthen our onboarding training and employee management systems, expand our leadership development program and ongoing staff training efforts, finally complete a comprehensive and non-monetary benefits analysis to help ensure the village remains a competitive and attractive employer for the future. So again, that kind of comprises our administration and finance budget. I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
There's no questions. We'll start with public safety on page 106.
you very much. Calling your attention to page 106, it's the department overview. Very briefly, the 1,000-foot view, discussing things for the next year. Public Safety Department is engaged in a number of collaborative efforts with other departments within the village, carrying us through the next 12 months. First of which is evaluating the recommendation staffing study, which is still underway. And we're anticipating a draft report related to the department structure and staffing. So as it is right now, we're going to hold steady with our current staffing model, and our current overall staffing until we see further instruction. We'll be careful with how those things are considered and implemented, considering front of mind as far as the overall cost. Next is, of course, the local adjudication program. We're looking into, which is already factored into the cost with our village prosecutor. This would be akin to any other organization or any other municipalities around us. The ability for us to adjudicate citations and have a better control within the village itself. And this is not to drive revenue, but this is, as Deputy Chief earlier mentioned earlier, is to bring people into compliance. As it is presently, there's not as much teeth. If we issue a citation, it goes to Spokane Courthouse, where that is handled outside, sometimes handled outside of with that purview. We're also going to be coordinating, which is already underway, coordinating the implementation of a new parking management system. As the village manager mentioned earlier, we are implementing a new system which is working in conjunction with the automated license plate readers, the CSOs, and the new, which will increase our efficiency and allow us to better track that, and not only on the assessing when appropriate for issuing citations, but also in the back end for the administrative function. Clean it up. Eager to express to everyone here that in April we are hosting a live field training exercise to standing up our emergency operations center once the village board room upstairs has been updated. We'll be able to work in conjunction with Cook County Emergency Management and everyone in the region, where we will host a large scale exercise with individuals to test our strengths, determine what weaknesses are in place, and see where we need to move forward. We are also looking to continue to identify medium and long-term onboarding training programs as we bring personnel on as new hires or as lateral hires, but also for succession planning. We want to make sure that we strengthen the pathways as ever. It's an ongoing project. Wrapping up also, or coming down to, we are aggressively as ever, as Adam had mentioned, with the refining of our hiring process through our HR manager. We're always aggressively trying to hire, recruit and hire new personnel. Pleased to announce just generally that this current process, which we've just refined, seems to be moving along very efficiently. It seems to have a great deal of interest even since we've opened up this one point of continuous testing. We've had a lot more people test now than we have in previous opportunities in previous years. And it's an ongoing process. Lastly, for the overall, we're looking to prepare to negotiate our successor agreement with the FOP as we're getting closer to that. Again, looking at and discussing internally where we should focus our efforts in anticipation of that negotiation. Also, I had stand ready if you have any questions in regards to that or any of the topics. Yes.
Explain a little bit about the local adjudication.
Sure. The best way I would describe it is it would be a locally held court, which would be held here. Well, I'm sorry, strike that. So the premise behind that is typically each village hosts their own adjudication court where they would have low level municipal ordinances that their law enforcement for their enforcement end would issue citations and then refer that to the local adjudicator. Our interest in doing that is to combine with another municipality, which for a multitude of reasons, namely the cost sharing element, which we would look to see that there are two different municipalities we're looking to host that with, and those discussions are underway. The idea behind that is, again, you have a greater control locally to bring, offenders into compliance. Why we would do a cost or why we would do a partnership with other municipalities is largely based on cost sharing. They already have infrastructures in place, number one. Number two, we wouldn't anticipate it would be necessarily a significant burden on them because I don't feel that we're going to be having an excessive amount of citations issued to bring the forward. And also, I'm sorry. Correct.
Okay.
So this is like, you're gonna municipal prosecutor, it goes to courthouse, it's gonna be like a Northbrook, go to Northbrook, got some kid.
It is exactly like that.
And Northbrook.
It is,
Okay.
it's exactly like that. And in fact, our village prosecutor that we have actually is the same village prosecutor for the same two municipalities that we were discussing. So it would be a very, it's a very streamlined process. And it's already built into the cost. For the task.
And who's the judge?
It'll be, it's a hearing administrator that's
Right.
hired by the municipality.
Building code.
Building code also ultimately, once we redevelop and reorganize the municipal houses, the building code would also have an option of going.
Permitting backend.
Is it the same hearing person, is assuming a partnership? Is there a panel or is there one, the same guy? Or
It's a hearing administrator that was here, that would hold the entire court. And they would have an individual contract with that, they would renew that. Whatever set term for that contract is, yes.
Do we have things to software issue?
Well,
Do we have?
Not presently. The idea behind it is right now is the infrastructure is already in place and that's what, I'm sorry. It should be, we're hoping, knock on wood, as streamlined as possible.
So, and to be clear, we're not doing this to raise revenue.
No,
We are not Ferguson, Missouri. We're not looking to squeeze extra money out of our residents through this kind of thing. We're simply trying to encourage compliance by getting Scott laws to get back in line.
Yes, and this is, and also to be clear, we're one of the few municipalities that doesn't. So it's just bringing us more.
Okay, good.
Home rule has opened some doors for us on that front as well. There were limited opportunities for local adjudication before we were home rule. There are many more of them now.
So this is similar to what we did in the past.
For parking, yes.
That I did in the
Yes,
past.
that's right.
That I did in the past.
Yep.
But it will include other.
Yeah. Much more wide ranging.
Yeah. And it's a banquet staff.
Any other questions?
Works. Okay, thank you. So, the public works, starting on page 126. The biggest new item that I'm excited to talk about is the proposal of additional staff in engineering tech. So I think we've recognized we needed some additional support in public works, particularly for our engineering division. And what we're hoping with this engineering technician position is that it will support not only public works, but also development services. This position will focus on plan and permit reviews. The majority of the reviews that we see are something that they can take in. Anything more complex or that needs a higher level of review would remain with our village manager, with the oversight of our village manager. But this engineering technician would take on the majority of those. They can also handle a lot of the site inspections that our village engineer is currently doing. Work with residents directly, be that first response for customer service, questions, concerns, actual performing the site visits, and meeting with residents. They would also take on helping with FOIA responses and small contract management. So we're just seeing this as an opportunity to take a lot of this kind of firsthand interaction. And a lot of time that our village engineer is currently spent away from his desk, out in the field, and bringing on an engineering technician to kind of help assist and alleviate James's time to really start focusing more on this like long-term planning and investment with our capital projects that I think that we need. I think it's also gonna give us more time to reflect on some of our processes, streamline them, make them better, invest into certain programs. For me, a heartache is like the number of times we research easements. Because we research it once, we find our answer, and then it disappears back into the void. But if we can, do a full, program to enter that into our GIS information, it's something that we will have to research once, we'll record it, and we'll have it forever. And so it's just kind of that type of program. We're really feeling like there was a positive benefit for years to come to limit the amount of rework that we do with our current processes. The other.
Question, don't you also do some grants administration?
We do, so, right, and this could help with that as well. I know our public management analyst does help with a lot of our current grant applications for us and public safety. But this could help in identifying potential grant opportunities.
Okay.
Engineering tech position will limited elements be that they were told in advanced science and civil engineering, or could they have any kind of degree, or would they be in the track to get a PE? Or
that is a question. So I think we specifically picked the engineering tech title to not have the specific requirement of a PE or even on that track. There's another track, it's like engineering technology that you can get, and it's a different track, but I think it's that same technical knowledge. So obviously we want somebody with kind of an engineering background, whether it's like on the site field experience or more of like a plan review experience. I mean, we want them to have that technical knowledge. But I think we're kind of trying to broaden the title to bring in a different group of people, not just those who are on that PE engineering track.
But it won't prohibit someone from applying.
Not at all. They could be as well.
Must have and.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we contracting out for some of those services now?
As much as we can, but a lot of it is still being performed in-house. Yeah. So, other highlights for next year, I know I've talked a lot about kind of our overall project planning, collecting good data, creating multidisciplinary projects. So that is still ongoing. I just kind of want to give you guys a peek under the hood of where we're at with some of this. We are currently working with our GIS coordinator, MGP, on creating a CFP planning tool. We're on version 2, and I'm expecting there'll be a lot of versions as we are in this kind of iterative process. But what we're trying to do is change the way we think and approach CIP projects. So I just wanted to kind of point to a couple of examples. Like I think a year ago or 2 years ago, I'm losing track, but we went to you and got a batch of water main projects approved for design. I think it was about 5 or 6 projects. We're about midway through. After the water main design project that we complete next year, we will have just 2 projects left. Dundee phase 2, and then there's also an upsizing of main on Forest Way from Dundee to Chestnut. After that, we kind of have a clean slate of where are we looking next. So same thing with like resurfacing. We know that we're working towards a 2027 resurfacing schedule, but we're trying to align all of those thoughts of where's our water main projects. Okay, we're wrapping up our stormwater master plan. Where's our stormwater projects? And how do we kind of converge all of those projects and ideas to come together in kind of this future 10-year CIP. So it's a work in progress. And I think the point I'm trying to make is, some of the planning started a while ago and we're still executing on that planning. And some of the studies that we're having are wrapping up, and it's going to take a couple of years to all come together. But I think the overarching goal is still there, and it's still what we're moving and progressing towards.
So one, and the solutions we currently have here in our town aren't meeting, kind of what we're looking to do.
Mhm.
I would want to invest too much time in something, we're going to get some dead ends and things like that, be a bad idea to look for other technological solutions. Maybe our IT director, when they come in, can kind of think about some of that and kind of help us out if some technology needs aren't being met.
Yeah, I think we can continue to
Continue to talk about that.
Mhm. Yeah. So some of the projects or initiatives that we'll be continuing on into next year is obviously supporting the construction. And at this point, it's really mostly just the construction of the clubhouse. Or design days are almost over. And we'll also be continuing on with the ongoing initiative of the tree planting at Shelton Park, or our tree nursery, which is very exciting. And then we have a couple new initiatives. So our franchise agreement for garbage, recycling, and yard waste collection, that is ending at the end of 2026. So the contract is done. So we will be starting probably mid-year or earlier to go out to bid, go out to RFP to solicit new competitive pricing to see who our future garbage contractor will be. We'll also be continuing on with the Sustainability Action Plan, phase 2 of our Stormwater Master Plan. And then we'll also be looking at new buckthorn removal opportunities, which is always a fun initiative. The last new item I just wanted to touch on is metro station improvements. I think we've just been eyeing this up for a while. And so what we're looking at next year is really creating tangible data and a budget that we can approach Metro with to negotiate. So we have a current agreement that talks about how we use and maintain this current station. And so we want to go to them and say, hey, we're looking at updates. What will you contribute and contribute based on the agreement that we have? And I think having a plan, having a budget is really going to help in these conversations.
Just to add to that point real quick, it ties in with the streetscape and parking analysis as well. That if we begin to invest in how we connect the Metro parking lots better to the downtown, we want to also start talking about how the Metro platforms look and the investment that they need to go into that as well. So it ties from a timing standpoint pretty nicely.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah. Right, so separately on our water funds initiatives, next year, the main replacement that we'll be focusing on is off of Bluff, Grove, and Milton. This is very close to where we were just working on last year, so some of those same residents who are impacted by construction will see more construction. And we are sensitive to that. I think it was the phasing of this, so we left certain stubs off of the project we did this year to continue on to next year, so it's kind of critical the timing of these projects, but we are going to be pulling backyard rear mains and pulling them back out into the street. So we feel like that is a huge improvement to how we maintain our system and how we operate our system. We're also looking at eliminating some dual running mains. So we have a 4-inch and 6-inch within the same street. I want to reduce that redundancy, which is a goal that we have in overall with our system, is to eliminate and abandon those existing 4-inch mains.
Are we on a new contract? Makes sense.
We're not using the same contract.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We'll also continue our lead service line program. We've dropped down the budget number back to its originally proposed budget of $250,000 a year. We had been playing catch up with some of the applications that had rolled over. We'll continue the recently awarded water supply analysis to help guide us through our ongoing discussions about the future of our water supply. But we'll also finalize and hopefully construct the security improvements down at the water plant. So this year, we're looking at a couple concepts. Next year, we'll pick the concept, complete final design, and hopefully get out to bid for the construction of those improvements. And then just operationally, we've had huge success with our leak detection program. That was launched in 2 phases. We completed it last year. We have just found so many water main breaks before they've surfaced. So we're out there before it's even become a problem, which is just incredible. We've actually identified a lot of leaks on service mains. A lot of them were lead, and so, you know, we're contacting the homeowners saying you have an active leak at your main, and we've been able to walk them through our cost sharing program and help them get those leaks replaced. So we've seen a significant decrease in our net water loss. And I don't want to speak too soon, but I feel like we're at a point where we really found a successful program, and I've encouraged our general superintendent for the water plant to really start attending conferences and talk about this and work with the vendor, because it's been so successful for us. I just been share the good news and get others on board. And I know we've shared it with some of our neighbors for them to look at as well, but it's been hugely successful for us in the way that we operate, as well as our valve turning program. With this annual program, we've identified inoperable valves, and, you know, some of them we have to place on a schedule for future replacement. Some of them we replace in-house. And I just think that's also spoken to the way we maintain.
Are you able to merge this leak detection program with your broader program of making sure we don't fix the street and tear up the street? So
Yeah, and so that's kind of all looking at the data that we have. I know I'd spoken to you guys previously, kind of looking at our current plan of water main replacements focused on you know, age, material, and number of leaks, and we looked at that in 2016. The map that we're creating now will look at those in real time. So each year we can be using current and accurate data to help prioritize which means we should be designing for and which means we're replacing. The whole kind of put that up against what streets need to get resurfaced. Now all of our streets have pavement conditions. So we're getting really great data to kind of overlay and visualize where all the need is, and then kind of group projects together so that we can be doing water, storm, and street resurfacing, indoor sanitary lining, all within 1 year.
Great, that really is very impressive.
Still getting there, but thank you.
One thing to point out, also jumping back to the previous item relative to the security improvements of the water plant. That is something that Monica and her team are working hand in hand with the park district on. This is sometimes a question that we get from the community of, how are you going to do that? Because I can't get to the boating beach, or I can't get to the swimming beach. And so that's very much been front of mind for our team along with the park district. So that as that's being designed, we're being as thoughtful as we can about kind of the public access question relative to the beach itself.
Right, which we are trying to maintain that public access. And I think for our approach, that's why we wanted a couple concepts to be able to look at to really allow some creativity and allow some different pricing ranges to be evaluated as well.
Public works. Now we move on to development services.
Development Services Department, everyone's familiar with department does, planning, building, et cetera. We have 3 full-time employees and a lot of contract employees in a variety of services for us. 2025 has been an exceptionally busy year for the department when it comes to budgeting. Likely our busiest year in approximately 20 years. A lot of that has to do with Forest Edge coming online, but also just in general, it's been a very busy year compared to recent years. It has been our first year with Safe Build as our partner for plan review inspectional services, as well as some code enforcement support. It's gone very well getting them up and running. We've seen some significant cost savings over our previous contractor with no drop off in service for our residents and builders. Looking forward to 2026, we do have one change in our staffing proposal, and that is to reclassify our planner, who's been here for a little over 6 years, to a senior planner role. With that would come some evolving responsibilities, taking on a larger role in managing our contract partners, including Safe Build. Also, moving really away from permit coordination role, and really will completely into a planner role with a lot of responsibility for special projects such as code updates that we've been working on. We're going to continue to partner with Safe Build, continue to look at the ways to improve our relationships with them, and that they can provide us. They really do a lot of different things. They're a pretty big organization that has a lot of professionals that we can use as needed. One of those, the biggest benefits of Safe Build is the ability to ramp up and ramp down our services as needed. As you remember from last month, we have brought on a temporary permit coordinator to help with our really exceptionally high permit volume that we've been seeing for the last year or so, and that we expect to continue. We do have a recommendation in this budget to keep that temporary position online into next year, either on a part-time basis for the bulk of next year, or on a full-time basis for part of the year. That's something that we're discussing with Safe Build about who they have and what will work best for our needs going forward. But that is something that we can ramp down as needed. If you see the permit volume is starting to drop off. Inspections are going to be the big one for next year, as these homes in Forest Edge are going to be under construction. We have a lot of inspections to coordinate, and we expect permit volume to also just remain high. We're going to continue to work with Tyler Technologies. We're 5 years since we started to build out our permitting software with Tyler. So it's time to really get under the hood and do a pretty significant tune-up on that next year. I don't see that being any additional expenditures other than some pretty significant step that's going to go into that. That's another thing that's going to be helpful to have that additional temporary support from Safe Build to allow our permanent staff to work on some of these special projects. The comprehensive plan, we started our implementation of that this year. There's a lot of recommendations coming out of that, a lot of code updates. We're working on a planning and development code with the Plan Commission right now. That's something that the village board will be taking a look at in the coming months. We have a zoning code, subdivision code. We talked about some tree protection code updates as well. And we're going to be working through it the next year. Plan unit development ordinance, I mentioned that already. And then also working with other departments on preservation initiatives, which we're already starting to see some of those code updates coming through, and also sustainability and economic development will both be some of the special projects that we're going to be seeing. So next year there's a lot of special projects with a lot of staff time that we're going to it's in the very near future here. We're going to be leading on our contract partners for some of the day-to-day operations as we have this year with some of that ramp up and ramp down as we see this increased permit activity working its way through the system. I think that's any questions that anyone might have.
I just have a question. So Tyler Technologies, I think that's one's doing the Cook County real estate. They are. So are we happy with them? I'm just kind of curious.
Are we happy with them?
Happy is a strong word. Anybody would ever use, but Tyler.
I would never use. Okay.
Two major providers of enterprise, like of ERP systems that local governments use. It's really falls into a company called BSNA and Tyler Technologies. And Tyler Technologies has a number of products underneath their umbrella. Their model is that they buy successful software companies, they try to couple them together. So they're pretty infamous for some clunky integrations, we'll say. But they handle everything from financial software to building permits to our CAD system. It's all under the Tyler umbrella. So they really have the market cornered. I don't know that you would talk to a single Tyler customer that's really satisfied with their work. We make it work.
Can you expand a little bit about what you're planning to do with the permit process this year? Just like getting in there, changing some of the defaults or,
With
Tyler.
Tyler, yeah. So I think a big one is there's so we started this in 2021. It's been working pretty well since 2020, late 2022, 2023. But there's just a lot that needs to be cleaned up. There's, I was talking to James an hour ago, he's trying to do a review for a cell tower. And we can't get his review to pop up. It's because we have to go and dig into the system, change our templates. And there's a lot of those things which we do one-off fixes here and there. We need to dig a little deeper, get it cleaned up. Another big one is the our CSS customer self-service portal, which has been up and running for over 2 years now. And it works. But there's some improvements being made as far as how it presents itself to applicants. Sometimes it can be very funky, sometimes the emails are coming from weird places, they look strange, the attachments are off. It works, but this is a chance to, I think, maybe work on it. And it's been kind of stuck up on us here a little bit. It's been 5 years since Tyler came for their site visit. I'll just build it.
So the reclassification for planner to senior planner, we have a valuable employee. We're trying to recognize valuable employee doing more, pay this employee more. That's what's going on.
That's part of it. He certainly is a valuable employee. He's taken on in-depth appeals. That's his now. There's some potential for him to take on more similar role elsewhere in the future. But I think that in addition to that, this is a reflection of what we want to do going forward and where we need to support. And he has a planning background, and we have a lot of really in-depth, complicated planning projects, whether it's subdivision code, which is going to need some serious work in the coming years. Zoning code obviously has a lot of things that he's going to be very involved in, and his changing responsibilities will reflect that changing workload.
Well, I have a question. On the board agenda for Thursday, there are a number of updates,
Yes.
code updates. Is that going to impact you with too?
The updates we have on Thursday should be pretty simple, because that's for the most part, it's an update as opposed to major changes. So I don't see that adding to our workload, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
I do think that should be pretty simple. There are a few minor changes, which will actually hopefully makes it easier for us, but for the most part, that's it. I hope that's updated, and that's what we're doing.
And there'll probably be some others coming next year when the sustainability group makes their recommendation, but for now, we've got to get our code up to date.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
So there are going to be other coming out of that, green building, electrical codes, et cetera. Those recommendations will likely come out of that sustainability action.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our last department update, remote fund. It starts on page 143.
What could be different from the goal? Yeah.
Reviewing some of the pilots for this year. Our budget of 4.8 does include 2.3 in operating. Our bulk capital budget of $288,000, and there is the $2.2 million transfer in cash reserves. The exciting highlights for us here are bringing on 2 full-time employees. So these are not new positions. These are existing positions that will become year-round to support the year-round clubhouse. The first one is the maintenance building. Essentially, this is going to equate to about 550 additional hours in the existing position. So bringing them from just seasonal, kind of like April through October to a full-time position. This person will be helping out with all the winter work. So keeping the clubhouse clean, moving snow, bringing snow, putting down salt. It's going to be flexible hours, mostly weekends and probably evenings in the winter to accommodate events. So we need somebody to help out with the maintenance of the clubhouse. They can also help with the mechanic in doing the winter work and preventative maintenance. This is also a way for us to retain very valuable employee by offering them benefits. They currently do not receive insurance, that's a huge benefit. They do stay under the 1560 threshold. All of our seasonal employees do, so we don't have to offer insurance and take on that cost. So the insurance, depending on what plan you would like to take, will add another $22,000 to $28,000 to the overall benefit package. But this is a way for us to retain someone. This labor force is very slim and it's getting smaller. So being able to offer a full-time position with benefits hopefully will help us retain someone. We do have somebody in mind for this position and hopefully we will meet that. On the other side, we have a position for, again, a full-time person in the pro shop. This is an existing position. This would not start until November of next year. The maintenance worker would begin in January of this year. So this is not going to have that much of a budget impact in the pro shop because it's just going to be November and December. This position is going to take on a lot, the year-round position, having the new revenue stream on the simulators. So they have to have the knowledge of how to operate the simulators. Again, these are evening and weekend hours. Bless you. Operating all the rentals and throughout the year. And we're hoping to attract PGA apprentice, so they can also supplement their income with teaching revenue. So it's a way to, again, bring in more qualified position. And we do have somebody in mind for that. That's also in addition to receiving insurance, which neither of these positions currently receive. So we're excited about bringing those two on. It's going to be our first year operating the year-round facility. We are set for in golf season. There is no change for us. The restaurant is going to have their own employees, but for us, we're not taking anything on new. We can manage the simulator in season with the budget, which had a slight increase in the hourly pay. It's the off season that is going to be the big unknown, but we do need the maintenance help and we do need somebody to operate in November through December. So we're covered with these two positions, and then we'll see after we get through the winter what 2027 may bring in these two positions. I will encourage you, I'm sure you've already read it, but on page 163, we lay out the full department work plan for next year, which is really extensive. A lot of it is related to CIP, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But we are taking on a lot of projects to bring this clubhouse fully into fruition with all the amenities that we have been promising the residents. There's a lot of work to be done. Some of the ones that really aren't capital improvement related are managing and bringing in a new restaurateur. The RFP is in the final stages. To have that shared publicly very shortly. This is a big component of the restaurant. I've had several people reach out that currently are managing restaurants. I've also had many of our golfers and residents reach out with, when you have that RFP, give it to me because we frequent this establishment and I think they would be a great fit. So we're really excited to have that finalized and to share it, to bring it in. We have a whole process already established on how we're going to interview everyone. There's some pointed questions on the RFP to make sure that we have somebody that is going to bring in sustainability and follow along with the Glencoe Golf Club already is. And we're looking forward to bringing in a new restaurant, full-time restaurant that can also host events to the village. And then the year-round restaurant, in the simulators, these are new revenue streams. We are anticipating some additional money in the budget for these revenue streams. I expect that the simulators are going to be very popular as the golf course in Northbrook just recently put in new simulators and they've been seeing some really good revenue. So that's also reflected in the budget. The new cart lease is just one other thing I'll touch on is that We're bringing in some new technology with the carts. So we will be able to operate them every day of the year. When we have rain events, we can have them go out because there's geo fencing on it. If you do not follow the standard cart path, the cart will die. Right now, we can't do that because we say cart path only and they veer off the cart path and they do damage to the course. So this year we had about 12 days of cart path only, which it's kind of detrimental because people don't want to do that and they don't follow. So we have walking only, goes from cart path only to walking only because we just can't avoid destroying the course. So that's gonna bring in some new revenue there. There's also gonna be some features where you can order to the restaurant. So we'll get in some more business for the restaurant as well. You can pre-order, pick up things at the turn, request the beverage cart. And that every other golf course around here has that technology, so we're also gonna be slated right with everyone else. And they'll be a great addition to the new clubhouse and this new cart fleet, which will be housed in our basement and will be in a lot better shape than our current fleets. And the rest of the items I'll address during the CIP portion. Are there any questions?
Question. The restaurant itself, they hire their own people and manage the whole thing. We'll kind of have an arm's length relationship other than their contract. Is that right?
We will not manage them, but it will not be arm's length. We will have oversight over their menu and pricing, but over the performance of their staff, and we will have the ability to recommend if we don't like someone's behavior, that they are no longer on site. So it's a partnership, but they will manage and take all the risk for paying their staff, all their HR, all the cost of goods will be on the restaurateur. But it will be a partnership. I mean, even though we have a very small business right now, we do work together to try to get them money and, you know, give them the free advice on how they should run their business, to make sure that it's also giving the highest quality of service that we demand of our staff.
Will we have someone on site then during the day, even in the winter?
Yes, yeah, and that's part of the hours of operation that's outlined in the RFP.
Okay. I just wondered if there was a snowball fight, who'd call the police? Okay, thanks.
To join?
Yes, sir.
Be clear, it'll be us. Throwing the snow.
Starting a snowball fight.
I'd be disappointed if you weren't.
You gotta do ballistic shields.
Nicely done.
Coming for, you know, parties are the village collecting any type of like, or any of the taxes, or we can recoup anything to people having party that, you know, how does that work?
Yes, well, our existing vendor does have the places of being attached, so they're currently paying that.
Yep.
And
And that, I'm talking about the new vendor.
Yes, yeah, they will also be subject to.
Yeah, they're subject to it,
Everything.
they're within the corporate boundaries, so.
But also, I think that's gonna be the part and parcel of what kind of managerial contract it is, and consequently, what our share of the revenues are. It's that's what, yeah, it's not a technical partnership,
Yes.
you know, but it's colloquially a partnership. Yeah, but if you have lots of events there, will be better.
This might be a natural stopping point for a brief break if anyone needs.
Let's go to things.
I was gonna say, we're halfway through, so that's pretty good.
I thought you were gonna go with first, third. I really wanted to see your face. If it's a first.
It brings us more money.
And then the ones you gotta back up, right, you gotta.
See my response for the answer.
I can't.
I'm available tomorrow between 9:30 and so. Well.
Yeah. It's loud. Okay, but then I want to.
Okay. I think we will reconvene. Again, thanks everybody for not just coming, but for staying late. Much appreciated and I'm gonna wait to the end, but clearly, again, so much work. This is evident, this is so much work. It's gone in and thought, not just work, but thoughtful work has gone into this. And also the judgment that you guys have made in terms of what you've done, what you're proposing, how you're doing it. This village is in great hands because of you, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
I got a message from trustee Hallwack that he is dropping off at this point. It is another call, so. 7:28 PM, we will note that for the record.
Well,
But we maintain a quorum.
I was gonna say, we still have quorum. Continue.
We have a CIP program that's the summary that's on page 203, and Margaret's going to lead us through the summary.
So I'll be brief this evening with my introduction. You've heard a lot of these numbers already mentioned this evening in the presentation. The community investment program goes from 203 to 270 in your budget book. And after the staff will be able to provide you some more details about projects they'd like to highlight this evening. Discuss. Our 10-year plan includes $92.1 million worth of capital improvements. And that details specifically found on pages 205 and 206 of the budget book. The staff's goal is always to include the multidisciplinary infrastructure improvements that Monica talked to earlier. And then we've also got the golf club included in it, which we could mention more times as well. For calendar year 2026, we have $19.5 million worth of improvements planned. And that detail can be found on page 209. That's the nice one-page document that has the breakdown by the different funds of the projects. I'd like to note that the public safety rescue boat replacement, the equipment mechanical lift for service bay 3, which is a public works lift, and the golf club renovation project, all will have some grant or private funding that will offset the cost of those items. Our financing plan on page 207 outlines our anticipated revenue bond issues in calendar years 2026, 2029, and 2032. And then we have our potential referendum on issues in the years 2026, 2029, and 2032 as well. And then, as mentioned before, the water treatment plants upgrade or replacement, the potential public works garage or relocation, and the district streetscape and parking study construction are all items that do not have funds allocated to them specifically in our CIP at this moment. I now turn it over to Assistant Manager Hall to take us through a few items to begin with, and then we'll turn it over to Monica Sarna to start with our public works items and so on and so forth, the other directors.
Thank you, Assistant CFO Schwartz. The calendar year 2026 investment plan for village facilities, I'm just focusing on village facilities for my presentation this evening, includes 2 major improvements and 1 space needs analysis. The Village Hall South Entry renovation will reconstruct the existing entrance and a new portico, and replace the driveway panels that serve the fire bay. The Public Works locker room upgrade will modernize the 28-year-old employee space original to the building. Improvements will include new partitions, updated lockers, and other minor enhancements to support employee comfort. And finally, the Village Hall and Public Works space needs analysis will evaluate current facility utilization, identify opportunities to improve workspace efficiency at the Village Hall, consider long-term planning and potential economic development opportunities related to the Public Works facility. And I'll turn over to Director Sarna for the remainder of the CIP.
So a lot of items that we can go over. So I'm just gonna run through a couple that I want to highlight. The first one is a purchase for a new sewer camera. That's on page 218. We're gonna be purchasing the same type of equipment, same brand, for our evaluating our storm and sanitary sewer systems. It's standard equipment. But the exciting feature of this purchase is that it is going to come with a new cloud-based platform, which will house all of our sewer data. So kind of bringing this into the modern world. It allows us to access those videos much more quickly and efficiently and view them in a way that notes where those deficiencies are within their cloud-based program. That does come with a cost, so there will be an annual fee now moving forward. That cloud-based subscription, access our storm videos. We do feel like this will be an overall benefit to the way that we guys interact with those videos to maintain our system.
All the old videos of the videos as well, or these one forward?
Yes, we have. Some of them will be easier to streamline than others. Right now, our process is very manual and not all of our videos that we have archived have gone through the process to be in the format that it needs to be in the cloud base. So the ones that are in the correct format, it's just an easy upload. And then we'll just kind of have to sift through and prioritize what videos we do want to integrate into the cloud system. It just may take some selection and time to get there.
The 5 years later.
Correct, yeah. So is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Yeah, there is.
They don't have system yet that you just sort of put a camera in and it's automated and it runs through sort of, that's still a little high tech.
I mean, it's fairly high tech what we're doing. I don't know if you saw it this weekend. I know you were at track. The camera was out there. Some of the enhancements or improvements that we're gonna see with our new camera, or it's a robot, basically. As we run it through our sewer lines, is it's gonna be able to elevate and center within the center of the pipe, just enhancing what we're gonna be able to see, and enhancing, able to look through, look at some laterals, and navigate through. Sometimes, there's stuff on the bottom of the pipe, so lifting it up helps us.
And is there software that, I hesitate to use the phrase AI, but is there software that helps review the film to highlight where a human being should be paying attention?
Yes.
As opposed to, no, that all looks normal?
Yes, I think the reality is, we have been given a quote on cost for AI to review all of our old footage. So again, is that worth it? We're looking into it. But going forward, yes, you can use AI to just streamline and review all the camera footage. The reality is that our operators do that as we're looking at stuff. So as they come through and they see a crack or they see, an offset, they're punching it in and noting it as we go. And so we don't really see the value of adding that AI enhancement at this time. It's just, it would be redundant and repetitive. Because all of our crews are in ACS something.
They're trained and certified. And
Yes, there's a training and
seeing
certification.
deficiency in the recording.
Yeah. The next one I want to talk to you is on page 223, our stormwater master plan. This is phase 2, just as a reminder, phase 1 in this year has been focused primarily on modeling our storm system. And a lot of that is data collection. So we've had field survey completed in certain areas where we're not confident in the GIS data. That was completed by our consultant, but we're also trying to perform some of that data collection in-house to support this modeling. Moving into next year, phase 2 is going to be focusing a lot on policies and projects. So how do we change our stormwater policy right now with new development, or how we operate and maintain our system? How can we change those to make the system more resilient, but also carving out projects, identifying areas of need, will help us with the use.
What is there's a map on page 24, what's that show?
All of our storm system.
It just shows the map.
Yeah. I mean, we have,
Direction of flow, little arrows to tell you which way the water flows, things like that. Dave Powell always used to tell me that Green Bay Road was the center line and everything would flow apart from Green Bay Road.
Continental divide.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's why all those lines point towards your basement.
I don't have a basement, but I know that there aren't any lines in my house. Because it's private sewer, which is an issue.
all right, the next one is on, oh, sorry.
You'll also be looking at green infrastructure as part of
Yes.
this?
Yeah, the green infrastructure is being evaluated.
Okay.
And how we can incorporate it to our future planning.
Okay.
The next one is on page 225. This is the streetscape and parking study. We've already touched on this a bit tonight, but this item here is still somewhat of a placeholder. I think we want to continue and move that forward. Will this be used for design? Will we be able to implement some construction component? I think that's where we're still kind of navigating through and trying to figure out the best use as we move into next year. The next two are two vehicle purchases for public works on page 232 and 234 are units 37 and 32. Unit 37 is our grappler. This is an essential piece of equipment that our crews use in the forestry parkway. It helps with large branches, stump grinding, all of our parkway landscaping and maintenance. So this is a replacement. As is unit 42, which is Glencoe dump truck that we use, has a plow quick to it during the winter months. It's essential to our snow and ice control program. Both units will be put up for sale and auction through our new GoGov process. So instead of doing a trade-in with the dealer, we've actually gotten a lot better pricing if we post these surplus vehicles on GoGovs and we put up for auction. Don could speak to the amount of revenue that we've gotten this year, but it's been impressive and we're quite pleased with our new participation in this program.
Yeah, significant over what you would get from a dealer to trade in. Let's see, we're getting 2 times, 3 times.
Wow.
Who's eligible to buy on GoGo? Anyone?
It's called Gut Deals.
Sorry.
And
You need to use grappa?
yeah, anybody can bid.
I'm just curious, like, who has access? Yeah.
Anyone can bid. We actually, one of our dump trucks, we sold to a dealer who's in Missouri. So he came here, picked it up, put it on a trailer and took it back. So, yeah, it's a great system. Additional revenue
I
stream.
was thinking.
Who doesn't need a grab?
Right.
The next one is on page 227. This is the West Park parking enhancements. Just want to clarify that this project is led by the Park District. We are going to be supporting and working with them on the funding of the additional parking spots. So I know they've approached us. They were planning on putting in the 88 parking spots to support park enhancements at West Park. And we said, you know what, why don't we take that a step further and just get parking? It's been a chronic issue, I know. We have coordinated several times on responding to complaints about parking and enforcement. We've adjusted the signs several times. But I think in reality, this is a solution that would benefit that park, those park users, and also the neighborhood surrounding. The next one is on page 240. That is the water plant site security. I feel like I've talked about this a bit, but right, this is just picking final designs and prepping the construction documents and bringing to bed and hopefully starting construction. The water main replacements on page 242. Again, that's the backyards and the front yard main replacement. We will be starting on some of that coordination work this year. So part of that is a complicated project, even though it's seemingly a smaller scope. We will be starting to knock down the doors of some of these backyard services, doing a full investigation of, where their service line comes out of their house, what other utilities they have on their property, in order to figure out, how do we specify this replacement? How do we work with homeowners and how do we make sure that the contractor has all the information they need to make a good bid? So that coordination is starting this year. We are anticipating trying to go out to bid for this project in January. We looked at December, but I think the reality is if we don't get it out before December 1st, the time over the holidays, we're just not going to get good responses. So aiming for January 1st will probably be the optimal time to get the best responses.
Let me stop for a second. As I understand it, one of our initiatives, one of your initiatives has been to put stuff out for bid when we're gonna get a good price. And I just want to say, keep it up. So this is an example where you're thinking about that, okay, earlier in the year. Good.
Yes, that's our goal. The next one on page 258, this is a project you all have probably not seen for a while. And again, in the past, I think this might have been designed and constructed within the same year. But this is preparation for a street resurfacing program that we're looking to relaunch in 2027. So we will be selecting a batch of streets for resurfacing for the next 2 years. We're be putting together the design drawings, kind of scoping out which is for 2027, which is for 2028. Kind of all that design prep and planning, scoping. And then again, with the hope that we will have these drawings so that we can go out to bid at the very beginning of the year and hopefully get the best pricing possible. The next one is on page 260, stormwater improvements. I want to talk about this one because we are taking a bit different approach, and this is to try to get in mind multidiscipline idea. So this project has been somewhat rebranded from the original Park Avenue outfall. This is by the water plant. That outfall there needs to be reconstructed because we've been having some issues with it. So in reality, this scope of the project, which it may be included in the water plant site security improvements. So we may take this design and put it within that bid of the work because of the proximity. That might make most sense. We're also expanding the project a little bit to include pipe journey all the way up the bluff to make sure that we have a system that we can maintain and access from the top of Park Avenue all the way down to the bottom. So if it makes sense, we're going to include this in the water plant site security bid package, or it may be standalone. We also have funds within this line item to help support stormwater improvements within the water main project. So we already know that there's a section of Bluff Street that has 3 storm sewers within a segment. And it's very hard to install a water main when you have 3 storm sewers crowding the street. So we're going to look at consolidating and reconfiguring that storm to help with the water main improvement, but we're going to take some of this funds from this project. So this line item might not have any singular bid, but it's all stormwater infrastructure related. And those funds might be supporting some other CIP projects where it's together. Does that make sense?
Does this have to be coordinated with the park district too?
The Park Avenue outfall?
Yeah.
We have, I mean, I've already sent them the design so that they're aware of it because they're also doing their beach improvements.
Yeah,
It
they're
is-
doing the big beach redevelopment plan right now.
Yeah, it is on our property, so it's more courtesy, like we don't need their permission or coordination, but yes, I have coordinated.
Good.
Yep.
Okay.
The last one I want to talk on is some future planning as well, some posturing. It's on page 263, phase 1 engineering. I'm calling it for STP. So this is federal funding that is available for street resurfacing. Very few of our roads are actually eligible for this funding. So only our major arterial roads, which would be Green Bay Road and Dundee. So at this point, they're doing an open call for projects opening up this month. We are going to be putting both of these projects in there to get funded for phase 2 engineering. And then if that is successful, we'll continue an application to help with construction. So this is long range planning, but it's doing it in a way that if we start now, we can get funding for both engineering and hopefully funding for the construction. So I think when we look at those streets and the condition of those streets right now, you might be like, Green Bay Road's not that bad. I realize that, but it might be bad in 10 years when we finally resurface it and finally have the funding through STP to do so. So like I said, it's just getting us to get our foot in the door with the application to then continue on a very long process. And who knows how successful it will be, but my hope is that we will get on a contingency list and then funding. That's kind of long-term game plan. We have never applied for this funding before, so hopefully that gives us some sort of advantage of, I'm feeling like maybe we're.
Do
The survey.
Exactly.
not spending federal money in the next 3.5 years.
Yeah. Any questions on any of the administrative questions?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Would you like to cover mine too? So I will be very brief. I just want to cover two points, actually segueing the third one that I neglected to mention in the previous slide. Firstly, just for everyone's information, only one of them specifically impacts our budget next year. So I'll provide you first with a brief update. In May, and this is regards to our squad, the replacement squad, which I had to look and see. This process began back in December, October, December of 2023, when I was here for about 2 weeks. So in May, the squad build committee headed by Lieutenant Bezosa and followed by two PSOs, Harlow and Orzma. They traveled down to the E1 factory in Ocala, Florida, which is normal to complete the pre-build process. This is normal whenever a municipality is ordering a vehicle like this. There's the initial design, and then obviously things change, technology modernizes it from start to finish. So they went down to complete that process. The committee toured the factory to see exactly how the apparatus is being manufactured, and they gained valuable insight as to the design of Glencoe's new Squad 30. Plans were then updated based on their findings and meetings with various engineers to ensure a safe, reliable, and functional apparatus, not just building for one to receive it, but in anticipation of it functioning for its lifespan and being capable of within its entire lifespan. And meeting your needs. Project is still well within the allotted budget, thankfully, not increase the budget overall, those changes. And factory completion is still on track for May, June of 2027. Now, this is highlighted, as mentioned by village manager earlier, not just on the consumer market, but also especially on the individual market purchasing of squads, engines, and any sort of large vehicle. We experienced this during COVID, just with purchasing regular squad cars, and now push through here. New Squad 30 will then, once it's completed there at the factory, it's going to be shipped locally to Fire Service Inc. For approximately 1 month, we're guessing, 1 month of outfitting. Again, that budgeted cost is $1,410,000 at that time. So that is not going to impact us directly. That also brings me into for discussion. We are beginning very preliminary stages to replacing ambulance as well too. We have a placeholder of 450,000. It is not anticipated to be for us to receive it or need it until 2028. But again, just to let you know, this is the level of logistics and planning that needs to go into place. The staff is very careful in making sure that we're finding those and taking those steps into account to make sure we have something in hand. Lastly, for discussion is on page 216, the public safety rescue boat liquidation. Very exciting photograph, but I'll say, so our current boat is 2008. 2008. They anticipate, or the suggested manufacturer, or anticipates it to have a lifespan of 10 to 12 years. We're now through 17. Now, I see the faces of some of them. The reason why we've been able to maintain this boat for so long is 2 reasons. Number one, if you notice in the picture, this is taken in our garage in the downstairs. We keep the boat inside at all times, so that increases the lifespan. That's number one. Number two, PW does a great job as far as maintenance and keeping the thing afloat. It is an all hands on deck approach. If not, we would get something. So I had a list of these. I forgot. So now that said, again, Ken Kazoza at the helm of this operation. And again, with the number of individuals and support staff, they've researched and found that a recommendation, a 2026 190 Boston Whaler Guardian has been identified as the vessel that we're looking for. So now, why do we need that? So why do we need a boat? There's for 2 reasons. Obviously, we're a lakeshore community, so we need a life safety response. Also, for everyone's background, as things change on the federal level, one of the things that has directly impacted the Chicagoland region is the Coast Guard has diminished their footprint in the area. So they have changed often, their response time, or their response is not necessarily for the opportunity to save people, but more for a recovery. Meaning, it could take them upwards of 2 hours to respond to a scene if all things go well. So there's a burden on any community that has lakeshore property to have some sort of means of response. Now that in conjunction with this, as with all of our other plans, be it EMS, fire, or police, we respond to the region. So this is our way of also participating. So having a boat that we can store inside, and then we can also respond on over 2-foot waves, because our current vessel will swamp if it's over 2-foot waves. So to make sure we can respond in different climate conditions, and also as a reminder, we need a vessel that can also respond to the Skokie lagoon as well, and we have deployed it in the past. It's the same. So we need something that can use both, that can be both ways. So that is on deck for replacement. Now, of interest and the reason why it's of note is we just before things slowed down on a federal level and shut down, and everyone went home. We had a unique opportunity, first in over 10 years, to apply for a port security grant to cover the entire total cost that, and then some additional training. So we're anticipating response. It is a very compelling grant. It was written by the team. So we'll see. In the event, and again, we're trying to be careful with your money. So in the event that that is not granted, the grant is not granted, we've begun preliminary discussions with the foundation to seek either a complete or partial support for that as well. They're very eager. Again, as they become more successful in their fundraising efforts, they're looking for more opportunities to support the department and support the village. So this is something, especially even as recent as this recent Saturday, they're eager to support in that way. So that's an option as well, and if the grant sinks. So, if you have any questions in regards to these or any others.
I
Gonna
have,
make you walk the plank for this game. We're gonna be piloting us through that, let me tell you, we really did.
it was a good presentation, otherwise I would have got it. So, do we know, does the park district have any kind of a rescue thing? associated with these, or they depend on us?
No, they depend on us. I can say, well, I'm not aware of any time the park district has called for.
They have a boat for their rental.
They're both the rental boats?
Yeah, to get their people back.
I know also they always have the opportunity for lifeguards on duty at all times, so. But again, we deploy the boat as in conjunction with, from a harbor, and are able to tow the boat. It has to be a small enough boat to be on a trailer, very specific, to tow it out, rapidly deploy it, and have our staff rally to that location and then be in the water as quickly as possible. So this would meet the need.
Since the Coast Guard, it seems to have retracted some of their, the same here, they tell us, or why didn't we think what?
No, so it was a very surprise meeting, and this is something that's been happening over, it's been going for some years. I'll say my previous experience, they seasonally would occupy off Navy Pier. It's a combined headquarters off Navy Pier. They no longer staff it, they no longer staff even in summer in Chicago. So the nearest they're coming from is Milwaukee. Or Kenosha. It's the nearest they're coming from is from Kenosha. So
Andy, was it 3 years ago that they informed us that they were dialing back?
They were
Pretty
going to a
substantially.
part-time basis, I think 4 years ago in Wilmette. And now the station in Kenosha staffs both Kenosha and Wilmette. They alternate like 1 week a month to basically cut the grass, but they're otherwise most of the time up in Kenosha. And the helicopter that used to be stationed in Waukegan is now at Traverse City.
yeah, whenever we met with
Our
our
rescue efforts are very.
Yeah.
whenever we met with our local elected officials on the federal level, we've raised this issue. They're listening and they're doing I feel they're doing their part as well to kind of raise the alarm. We'll see how it plays out going forward. But it's something that we have to always maintain a response.
Presumably our staff or some combination of our staff and Vegas. You're all trained on this.
Yes, yeah, we have pilots, we have personnel that can pilot aircraft and divers, public safety divers. We maintain support.
Part of the dollar amount that's included this would be the training costs. for
Because
the
new
vendor to come up.
equipment.
It's new equipment and tech.
Perfect. That was the question. Thank you.
Yeah, go.
Next. So is, if you did too earlier, we do have a long list of capital projects. I just wanted to touch on a couple of them tonight. One of them is the clubhouse itself. So this has been a long-term project. All the pieces are in place. I do want to talk about the owner's items that are on top of the budget. And how we have already discussed. How we fund those. The unrestricted cash balance of the golf club is approximately 2.7 million. Friends, the Glencoe Golf Club has 1.7 cash equivalent plus pledges. So together between those two sources, we have 4.4 million. It's a pretty good start. I think Friends is going to continue to raise more money. And the golf club will have larger unrestricted cash funds as well. But the majority, if not all of the owners' items are covered between those two sources. And in the owners' items are things that we did not include because we didn't want to pay the 2.5% management fee to WD Olson. And this allows for customization of some unique to the project when we take ownership of purchasing them and researching this out. So the millwork package, the simulator room design and installation, we've already reviewed and approved. Some other things are the monument sign, audio, visual, and IT for the building is going to be on this list. The temporary operational facilities, which will run into next year as well. Some of the brush and buckthorn removal. Community garden, new tea signs, and the bike repair station. Along with the short game and croquet area. All of these are owners' items. Now, one other thing to note is our range tee renovation. This is all total is $250,000.
Golf club is at 247 and now Stella's moving at 249.
Sorry.
If you're following.
The tee line at the golf course, so the parking lot is expanding to the east, which is going to approach on the tee line, so the tee line has to also go further east. And we were going to create a new tee line, which requires us to install drainage, irrigation, and shaping of that tee line, and also providing a low over a sod for that. And because of that shift as well, we are going to have to install a higher net. This is not going to allow for the use of drivers, but this is just going to contain any errant shots from exiting the golf course. Where the tee line is now, a lot of those are buffered, but because we're going so far forward, we need this protection so we can keep the balls onto the golf course. We're also going to have to put a net the back of the tee line because we're getting closer to the trees and we don't want all of our range balls to disappear in the tree line. We want to be able to pick them up. So those are two larger items as the on the overall checkbook.
We've been talking and haven't done it with a higher net, so you could have drivers in and that is a future project.
It is not funded. So last year, the estimate on that was 1.5 million. It is a very high ticket item. That is something that once we get through this process with Friends, we want them to take on that initiative separately, just raising funds for driving and netting. We are investigating right now because the netting would be a telescopic pole. If it is feasible for us to use the larger telescopic pole to get a 25-foot net, so we wouldn't have to rip down $150,000 net in 5 years or whatever it's going to take to raise that money and redo the whole thing. That will add a lot of money to the project. So we're investigating if we can try to plan ahead with the telescopic poles, but it would definitely jump up the project.
goes without saying, but if you're following along, these projects are in the capital projects fund, not the golf club fund. So these are primarily funded by bonds. And then any donations or fund balance that comes from the golf club fund. I'm gonna take you back for the last two. Back to page 220. And 221 and 222. We have two major IT infrastructure upgrade proposals for 2026. We've talked a lot about the water plant scale, if you remember, in this year's CIP, we do have in progress the change out of our main server that supports our SCADA system at the water plants, our supervisory control and data acquisition software, which is just a fancy way of saying it's software that monitors the pressure throughout the system, that allows us to control the pumps, the pressure throughout the system, sends warning levels to our staff if our levels get too high or something in the system is off. With the water plant SCADA, it was installed in 2020 or 2021. That equipment is now end of life cycle, so that's why we're replacing it in a similar fashion. Our sewer SCADA is of similar vintage. We have some concerns about the existing core equipment that operates the sewer SCADA system. One of the primary functions of the sewer SCADA system is that it tells us the levels that are happening in our sanitary sewer lift stations. To say it bluntly, it's just not something you don't want to function because that can cause overflow into residential basements or elsewhere that you don't want sewage. So it is an important monitoring system that we have to maintain and reinvest in its end of life cycle. So in pairing with some of the core network upgrades that we've been making, we also have to invest in our operational technology to keep everything up to par and up to cybersecurity requirements. The other project, so that is earmarked for 95,000. The plan of staff is to develop specifications for the upgrade. This will be a shorter term upgrade with a plan in the 10-year CIP to potentially redesign the lift stations. So we may have some longer term redesign and improvements that go on, but this is really just a life cycle change out. Related to this, we have another 200,000 slated for the village's main core infrastructure. Very similar story here. We have some infrastructure that's outdated. We've experienced some failures. We've taken great lengths with both contractual services and equipment upgrades this year to try and stabilize the village's network, make sure again that we are in line with modern cybersecurity standards, but also reliability and right sizing our network for the growing needs that we have throughout the village and the demands that are happening on that equipment. Essentially, that equipment's running 24/7 to support public safety and the rest of the village. It needs to be reliable. So this is a proactive replacement of that core infrastructure that will be utilizing contractual services to assist us in changing that up next year.
And is this equipment that we think ultimately we will wind up pushing to the cloud, or is this stuff that we don't want anywhere near an external contact point?
So I would say it's going to be a hybrid approach. No matter what, we will be utilizing cloud services. There is some data that we need to store locally, just from an access standpoint. But for the redundancy and disaster recovery, if something were to happen here, we also have to have everything backed up in the cloud. So the short answer to that is it's going to be more expensive, but the village also needs to be more resilient. As part of this, we're also looking at segregating out portions of our network. So there's secure data that we have to secure no matter what, social security numbers, health information related to medical insurance, financial information related to auto debits of water bills that Margaret was mentioning. our public safety data is subject to a whole different host of criminal justice information standard requirements that cannot be stored outside of the continental US. So we have to segregate the network and upgrade our infrastructure to accommodate that, to make sure that we're in compliance with all the standards that are changing every day. Any questions on any of the projects we discussed or anything we didn't touch on? In home stretch. So what we're looking for is just feedback from the committee tonight. You have any comments that you haven't expressed already, or anything else in the budget book that we haven't addressed?
That's one item, and I appreciate the thoughtful additional revenue. And even the elimination of certain revenue, that it's more of a pain in the neck to get than it's worth. That's smart. But I think in our home rule capacity, I think we can maybe look further to see if there are other potential revenue sources, especially those, again, as was previously mentioned, that may be borne as much by people outside of our village as in our village. And I wouldn't do anything as a surprise, for example, the Writers Theater, but an entertainment tax of an appropriate amount that would be consistent with what any of us would pay if you bought a ticket to go to a play in Chicago. Nothing that would shock anybody that wants to buy that kind of a ticket, that sort of thing. Looking at things of that nature or otherwise that maybe any of our neighboring communities have. Again, I'm just focused on notwithstanding how much money we're spending, we have needs for a lot. And we haven't even gotten the police study back, et cetera. So I'm just kind of looking ahead and seeing that we should be proactive about that. In the same way we're being proactive about how to minimize and be more efficient about our capital expenditure.
I mentioned, so Public Works Director Sarna talked about how we're putting our name in for some federal programs for grants where we've never done it before. One thing we should be thinking about is, are we purposeful enough in trying to squeeze out every dime that we can get somebody else to pay? And if Harrison thought, do we need an employee whose only job 12 hours a day, to make it like our public safety guys, is finding somebody else to pay for our stuff? Now, I don't know what the answer to that is, but are we doing enough?
It's a good question. And, we've experimented with a few different approaches over the years with respect to consultant services. I think some of it is, to your point, the time that it takes to research and fill out and administer grants is sometimes not always worth the grant that you get, from the standpoint of the time that goes into that process. There may be a couple of different ways. We've heard from a few lobbyists who are interested in working with the village. That may be an approach. That isn't as much the grant administration side as it is perhaps the spotlighting of resources that may be available for certain and specific types of projects. We know that when we get into the streetscape design discussions, that those types of projects generally have grant programs that support them. Does our community qualify? How do we make sure that we qualify? How do we do more along those lines? I would not say that we have a solid path forward with the way that we have done it. I think we've been successful with some of our grants, but it is a bit more of a, when we see it, we respond as opposed to do we know where to go find it?
And again, are some of our neighbors more successful? If they are, what are they doing?
So, I mean, some of it is the type of project that's available, right? And when the resources are available for a type of project. I think one of the points that Monica was making in terms of like pre-work is making sure we have the projects that are available, if not on the shelf, pretty darn close to being on the shelf. So that when those grant programs, and in some cases, you know, we did hear from our congressman that, oh, hey, we've got resources that are going to be available. You have 1 week to submit a grant application. In those periods of time, there's frequently times where we'll just let that sale pass because we don't have something that is going to work, or we don't have the time that somebody would need to put into it or the resources that someone would need to put into it to make it a successful endeavor. That being said, we've tried that and sometimes we've gotten different grants than we expected because it gets passed from one office to another. That was the joint project with the Park District that we did a few years ago on the Bluff improvements at Lakefront Park. So, you know, that was originally we submitted that one to Congressman Schneider's office. It failed in that process. He handed it off to Senator Morrison's office, and we were able to get a pretty significant grant through her office. So it sometimes may not land here, but it lands somewhere else where resources are available. I would agree that I think this is an area that we could improve on, and I think I don't know that the scale and size of the projects that we have as a community would warrant a person. But that is an aspect of something that I would like us to think a little bit perhaps differently about at the staff level and come back to you guys.
It's just, and again, this is a time when there appears to be less federal money available, so maybe it's not the best.
There's
time.
probably less money available in
And, you know,
general.
Illinois is not
Right.
flush either, but it just, we want to make sure we're doing everything we can, and I recognize it would be a pure victory to spend $300,000 to get a grant of $150,000. I get that, we totally get that. The question is there something we can do that we should do? That we all know that we've had a consultant, you know, offering to, you know, help us. And again, is that worthwhile? I don't know. And I'm not really suggesting consultant. The question is whether if we upgraded our capacity in-house, that would help. I don't know the answer, but we should be looking to figure that out. Because to read this document and to recognize all the stuff we have to do, plus all the stuff that if you carefully listed that isn't included, we need money.
It's grant programs, I'm assuming that we're talking about are things that are publicly known to someone, published somewhere.
But they're not quite as clear as you might imagine. And they are disparate. So they're all over the place. And there are a few clearinghouses that we have access to, certainly. But it isn't as though if you call up Congressman Schneider's office and say, hey, what are all the federal grants you have available today? He's going to say, I've got 1. And then next week he might have 17. And the week after that, he might have. The appropriations process at the federal level right now is so wonky that some of these projects were also, I mean, I've had this conversation with colleagues in other communities. They've been awarded massive grants that haven't been paid out. So that's the other piece.
Another piece of it.
Yeah.
So there was this apparently as a result of the government shutdown, billions and billions of dollars in Democrat states,
Right.
which we live in, have just been canceled.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but we still,
That all being said,
we
you
still
know,
should be trying to.
This sounds like the perfect job for a well-designed AI chatbot to go out. Serious, I'm dead serious about going out and every time, you know, the
Stop
appropriate
saying that,
word
Al.
All right.
But they're
Not
listening.
saying it out loud so that every other community that's listening in doesn't also do. You, all joking aside, that is that is absolutely an aspect of how you can utilize AI. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you that you're gonna get the grant.
Or that it's not just made up.
Well, that's true too.
I don't verify it's real and that it's not hallucination. But it is something, it's like, if it's out there somewhere, go find it, and 10 minutes later, theoretically, they come back with something. Just,
I'm just gonna give a shout out to James, because I know he does a really good job working with our engineering consultants on asking them where they've had similar grant funding success. And that's how we've been able to find great, like I know with the South Green Bay stormwater, right? I mean, they basically said, you should do this. And you know, it was,
Right.
somebody told us we should do this, and then we had a great grant funding, but I know that's something you've got with all of our consultants, to your point. But you know what type of project it is, you know what we're doing, tell us where other clients or other municipalities have had good success.
I think one of the things just to point out is that we also have sometimes found ourselves talking ourselves out of programs. The STP is a really good one, right? The service transportation grants. We have often said, there's just nothing really that we qualify for. So maybe we shouldn't even try. And I think when we look at it, it is a little bit less of kind of a short view and more of the, well, we may not need it for the next 5 years, but if we're prepared and we have everything put together in 8 or 9 years, when we are ready for it, now maybe we're done. We can more easily submit and hopefully receive in those circumstances. And I think some of it is honestly, I think James does a wonderful job, but James is doing 500 wonderful jobs.
Right.
And so that's the other aspect of my hope with a few additional hands in the organization is that some of that won't be kind of on top of already a very, very high stack of pancakes of work that has to already be accomplished. And we can split that up among other folks.
Let me say, by the way, my concern about getting the grants, I didn't think of this by myself. Georgia has been on my case correctly and relentlessly, saying, you know, and she is completely right. So, okay.
Anything else? I think we hear you. We'll circle back.
all right, any,
I wanted to say to everybody for putting all of this work. I mean, there are so many questions that you answered before we were even able to, think of them. And I know everyone's, all the intricacies, you want to say thank you to everybody who for all this work and, very, very excited about this there. So thank you very much.
Very organized.
Yeah, it doesn't go unnoticed.
Presentations.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I think my saying applies. I've seen the future and it's expensive.
We're gonna get you a shirt. So we're gonna get you a shirt.
All right, is there any other
business? Oh,
Just the next step to give you that, so after today, you will see Thursday night on the village board agenda, we have a property tax levy hearing, so we'll review that. Library is meeting this week to finalize their tax levy request, and then in November, we're going to go a month early. All of the things that come with budget, we may be looking at changing the appropriations system to a budget officer system. We just got information from the village attorney today on that, so we'll be reviewing that. We will do a formal budget presentation at the board meeting, but it will be abbreviated. Promise, not another 3 hours. It'll be final consideration of the levy and then the consideration of fee and fine resolution. Then we'll have a few more budget items that will trickle into December, but the lion's share will be presented for you in November.
I have one question. I was follow up on something Gary started the evening with, which when he asked about the library. Because, so we did home rule, we thought we knew what it was about. And then we discovered after we did it, that, oh, we control the library funding, which we didn't realize.
It's actually,
Yeah, their tech, we control that now. And that means that if they decide they want to proceed with this big project for their library, we have to do it. And we've sort of said to them, and we will continue to say, hey, before we were home rule, you would do a referendum. If it passed, you get your money. If it didn't pass, you wouldn't. And we basically said to them, that's the deal. You know, we may think it's a great idea, but if it doesn't pass the referendum, we're not doing it. Here's the question. Okay, it passes. We want to do it. How does our commitment to our residents about PTEL? Are we still subject to the same PTEL limit?
Would not, because debt service is outside of PTEL limits.
Pizza was really operating bonds.
Okay. So we can, maybe it's an ignorant question, but that's why I can answer a good question. All right, so because what we've said to them is, I mean, they're gonna tell us what a great project is, we may think it's a great project. But if the referendum fails, go back to the voters, get it to pass.
And I would say, I think based on my conversations with the library executive director, they're very clear on that they understand that if the advisory referendum fails, they're going back to the drawing board. As opposed to just asking the village board to say, hey, it's okay, you know, whatever they're trying to be saying.
By the way,
Just, it was very clear.
if we
clear
thought-
perspective of that.
if we listened and we all thought waste of time, shouldn't do it. In my view, if the referendum passes, we're doing it. I mean, we're not.
One of the reasons they're coming on Thursday to the committee of the whole is to kind of basically make that pitch. As we shared, and as President Rowan noted, the village board doesn't necessarily have a veto, but it also kind of does. And so if you don't want to do the project, or you don't think the project is at the right scale, you have the ability to have that discussion. And so the library board president is going to be at that meeting. Howard and I have had a few meetings with library leadership. They are very, very actively pursuing alternative revenue sources for the project, but it's a big project, and you're not going to find donations to cover the whole of it. So that is a piece of this overall discussion. I think to your point, Trustee Rubin, before about integrating that cost into our overall debt load is an important one for us. And if that moves forward, my sense is that if the referendum, which would be in March during the Illinois primary, March 26th, I don't know that they would have an expectation of starting construction before 2027. So we would have to work out timelines on debt issuance and all those kinds of things. But yeah, so Thursday we'll be talking about that.
That's all I have.
All right. Then if that is all anyone has, can I please get a motion to move into closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Open Meetings Act, 2C11, pending litigation.
This is really,
I'll second it.
yeah,
And
just the two of you.
yeah, so let's get a roll call. I wonder how it'll come out.
Trustee Rubin,
Yes.
Trustee Mealopoulos.
All right. Thank you all, everybody.
So-
Appreciate